The schoolhouse smelled like chalk dust and pine smoke. Celine Vale stood at the window, watching the last of her students disappear into the early December darkness, their laughter fading as they ran toward homes where mothers waited with hot soup and fathers stoked fires against the coming cold. She pressed her palm against the frosted glass, feeling the bite of winter through the thin pane. 26 years old, and this was her life. Teaching other people's children, watching them leave, going back to an empty room. She told herself it was enough, had to be enough. Women like her, women with no family, no money, no claim to anything except what they could earn with their own hands, didn't get to want more than survival. Miss Vale? Celine turned. Little Margaret Brennan stood in the doorway, mittens clutched in small fists, her breath misting in the cooling air. I thought you left with your brother, Celine said, trying to keep the tiredness out of her voice. I forgot my reader. Margaret hurried to her desk, grabbed the worn primer, then hesitated. Miss Vale, are you having Christmas with somebody? The question hit harder than it should have. I'll be just fine, sweetheart. But Mama says everyone should have people at Christmas. Your Mama's right. Celine managed a smile that probably didn't reach her eyes. Now get on home before your family worries. After Margaret left, Celine stood alone in the empty schoolroom. She'd decorated it yesterday, pine branches over the door, paper stars the children made hanging from strings, a sad little attempt at cheer that would outlast her presence here by exactly 3 days. Then she'd go back to her rented room above Fletcher's Mercantile and spend Christmas like she spent every other day, alone. She extinguished the lamps one by one, pulled her threadbare coat tight, and stepped into the wind. Black Ridge in December was beautiful in a brutal way. Snow covered everything, the rutted main street, the false front buildings, the mountains rising like broken teeth against the darkening sky. Lanterns glowed in windows where families gathered. Somewhere a dog barked. The smell of wood smoke and cooking meat drifted on the frozen air. Celine walked through it all like a ghost. Nobody called out to her. Nobody invited her to warm up by their fire. She'd been teaching here for 3 years, and the townspeople respected her competence, paid her wages on time, trusted her with their children's education. But respect wasn't the same as belonging. Frontier towns had a way of keeping outsiders at arm's length, especially women who arrived alone and stayed alone. They were polite, sure, but politeness built walls just as solid as stone. She climbed the outside stairs to her room, hands numb despite her gloves. The space was small, a bed, a chair, a washstand, a stove she fed with split wood she bought by the bundle. Her entire life fit in a single trunk. Some nights that felt like freedom. Tonight it felt like proof she'd never mattered to anyone. Celine lit the lamp, started a fire in the stove, heated water for tea she didn't really want. Through the thin walls she could hear the Fletcher family below, their voices rising and falling in the comfortable rhythm of people who knew they had each other. She sat by the window and watched snow begin to fall. This was her 4th winter in Black Ridge. Before that, 2 years in a mining camp in Montana, where she'd taught in a tent. Before that, a year in a railroad town that dried up and blew away. Always moving, always temporary, always the woman nobody waited for. Her parents died when she was 16, cholera, during a wagon train migration that went bad. Her older brother Jacob tried to keep them together, got work as a guide in the Rockies, took her as far as Denver before deciding he'd make better money alone. Told her he'd send for her when he got established. That was 10 years ago. She stopped expecting the letter after the first 3. The truth she didn't let herself think about most days, was that Jacob probably died in those mountains years ago. Fell into a ravine or froze during a storm or got killed by bandits. The West ate men like him for breakfast, and it left women like her to fend for themselves. Celine pulled her shawl tighter. The room was warming, but she couldn't shake the cold that lived in her bones now, the kind that had nothing to do with weather. She'd learned to survive. That was something. Learned to teach, to manage a classroom, to stretch her wages, to ignore loneliness like you'd ignore a scar that ached when the weather changed. But survival wasn't the same as living. And watching other people's children run home to families every single day was slowly killing something inside her she didn't have a name for. The tea grew cold in her hands. Outside, Black Ridge settled into another winter night, warm and alive and full of people who had each other. Celine sat in the dark and tried not to think about how many more winters she could do this. Wotapasik. 3 miles beyond town, in a valley where the wind came straight off the mountains with nothing to stop it, Rowan Cross stood in his barn checking the horses before the storm hit. His ranch, the Double Cross, sprawled across 2,000 acres of grassland and timber. Biggest operation in 3 counties. 40 head of cattle, breeding stock worth a fortune. Contracts with buyers as far as Chicago. The kind of spread men worked their whole lives to build. Rowan had inherited it at 23 when his father died, expanded it, made it profitable even during the lean years when other ranches went under, and hated every goddamn minute of it. Not the work. The work was fine. Work kept you busy, kept your hands occupied, kept you from thinking. It was everything else. The house. The memories. The ghost of a woman who died 3 years ago and somehow still haunted every room. Papa? Rowan turned. His daughter Clara stood in the barn doorway, wrapped in a coat too big for her 9-year-old frame, her dark hair escaping from beneath a knitted cap. Thought I told you to stay inside. Eli's asking about the Christmas tree again. Rowan felt the familiar tightness in his chest. We'll get one tomorrow. That's what you said yesterday. And I meant it yesterday, too. Weather turned. Clara didn't move. She had her mother's eyes, gray and stubborn and too knowing for a child. We had a tree last year. We'll have one this year. Before Mama died, we always... Clara! His voice came out harder than he meant. Inside. Now! She flinched. Rowan saw it, hated himself for it, but didn't take it back. Couldn't take it back. Because the alternative was worse, was letting his children talk about before, about when their mother was alive, about Christmases when this house felt like something other than a mausoleum where 3 people went through the motions of staying alive. Clara left without another word. Rowan listened to her footsteps fade across the snow-covered yard, then leaned against a stall post and closed his eyes. Sarah. Her name still hurt to think. They'd married young, he was 20, she was 18, and for 6 years they'd built something good. Not perfect. Marriage never was. But good. Real. She'd given him Clara, then Eli, had turned this ranch house into an actual home instead of just a building where his father had raised him with iron discipline and no softness whatsoever. Then one February night when Rowan was away driving cattle through the northern pass, a blizzard came down off the mountains like the wrath of hell itself. Sarah had gone out to help bring the horses into shelter, collapsed in the snow 50 feet from the barn. By the time the ranch hands found her, she was already gone. Heart gave out, the doctor said later. Probably a weakness she'd had since birth, something that could have killed her any time. The cold just happened to be there when it finally let go. Rowan had made it home 2 days later to find his children orphaned and his house frozen in a grief nobody knew how to thaw. 3 years. 3 years, and he still couldn't walk past her sewing chair without his throat closing up. Couldn't hear Clara laugh without remembering Sarah's laugh. Couldn't look at the piano in the front room, the one Sarah played every evening before dinner, without feeling like he'd been gut shot. So he'd done what he knew how to do. Shut it down. Locked it away. Kept moving forward because stopping meant drowning. The children learned not to mention their mother. The ranch hands learned not to ask questions. And Rowan learned that if you worked hard enough, exhaustion could pass for peace. But it didn't, and he knew it. And some nights like this one, when the wind howled and the snow started falling, and he stood alone in a barn on a ranch worth a fortune, Rowan Cross wondered what the hell he was surviving for. The barn door opened again. Boss? Miguel Reyes, his foreman, stomped snow off his boots. Good man, loyal, had worked the Double Cross since Rowan's father's time. Storm's coming in harder than we thought, Miguel said. Weather like this will be snowed in till after Christmas easy. Supplies good. Yeah, but the kids... Rowan waited. Miguel shifted his weight, uncomfortable. Mrs. Brennan came by earlier. Said her daughter Margaret mentioned Miss Vale at the school don't have anywhere to go for Christmas. Not our problem. Clara overheard. She's been talking about it all afternoon. Keeps saying it ain't right for Miss Vale to be alone. Clara's 9 years old. She doesn't understand how things work. Maybe. Miguel met his eyes. But she ain't wrong either. Rowan felt something twist in his chest. Anger, maybe. Or shame. Hard to tell the difference anymore. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting your daughter wants to do something kind for her teacher, and you're going to tell her no because Because I don't need another goddamn complication in this house. The words came out cold, final. Miguel nodded slowly. Right. Well, I'll go check the fences before the storm hits. After he left, Rowan stood in the empty barn listening to the wind pick up outside. He knew about Celine Vale. Everyone in Black Ridge knew about her. Came in on the stage 3 years ago, quiet, competent, kept to herself. Good teacher. The children liked her. Parents respected her. And she was alone. Rowan had seen her a few times in town. Watched her walk through the streets like someone who'd learned not to expect anything from anybody. Seen the way she smiled at other people's families with something that looked like longing buried so deep she probably didn't even know it was there anymore. He'd recognized it immediately, because it looked exactly like what he saw in the mirror. But inviting her here, to this house, with his children, during Christmas, that was asking for trouble. That was opening doors he'd spent 3 years keeping shut. That was letting someone see how broken they all were. Rowan headed back to the house through snow that was already ankle-deep. Inside, warmth hit him along with the smell of dinner. His housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, a tough Chinese woman who'd worked on the ranch since before Sarah died, stood at the stove stirring something that steamed. "Children ate already," she said without turning around. "Your plate's warming." "Thanks." "Clara's upset." "She'll get over it." "Will she?" Mrs. Chen finally looked at him. She was maybe 60, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, and had never been afraid to speak her mind. "Or will she just learn to stop asking you for things?" "That's not fair." "Fair?" Mrs. Chen set down her spoon. "You want to talk about fair? Those children lost their mother and you're so busy being angry about it, they're losing their father too." The words hit like a punch. "I'm doing the best I can." "Are you?" She turned back to the stove. "Because from where I'm standing, you're doing the least you can get away with. And those children deserve better." Rowan wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, wanted to explain that he was holding this family together by his fingernails and one wrong move would send them all sliding into darkness. But he couldn't find the words. He ate dinner alone at the table, same as every night. Heard Eli coughing upstairs. The boy had a weak chest, caught every cold that went around. Heard Clara moving in her room, probably reading by lamplight. His children. Growing up in a house that had stopped being a home. After dinner, Rowan stood in the doorway of the front room, looking at Sarah's portrait above the mantel. She'd had it done the year before she died. A gift to herself, she'd said. Something to leave behind. She smiled down at him from the canvas, forever 24, forever alive, forever unreachable. "I don't know what to do," he whispered to the empty room. The portrait didn't answer. It never did. 2 days before Christmas, Clara made her move. She did it at breakfast, when Rowan was tired from being up half the night with Eli's coughing, when his defenses were down. "Papa, can Miss Vale come for Christmas?" Rowan looked up from his coffee. Clara sat across from him, small and determined, her oatmeal untouched. "We talked about this." "No, you talked. I didn't get to say anything." "Clara, she's all alone. Margaret said so. Nobody should be alone at Christmas." "That's not our responsibility." "Why not?" His daughter's voice cracked. "Why can't we just be nice to somebody?" Eli appeared in the doorway, clutching his stuffed rabbit, his face still flushed from fever. "Who's coming?" "Nobody's coming," Rowan said. "Miss Vale might come," Clara said. Eli's face lit up. "I like Miss Vale. She tells good stories." "Nobody's—" "Please, Papa." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Please, just for Christmas. She doesn't have to stay after. Just so she's not alone." Rowan felt the ground shifting under him, felt himself losing a battle he wasn't sure he wanted to win. "It's complicated." "It's not complicated. You just ask her." "What if she says no?" "Then she says no." Clara wiped her eyes. "But what if she says yes and we didn't even ask? How's that fair to her?" Rowan looked at his daughter and saw Sarah in every line of her face, saw the stubborn kindness that had made him fall in love with her mother, saw a little girl who was learning to stop hoping for things because her father kept saying no. And he broke. "Fine. I'll ask." Clara's whole face transformed. "Really?" I'll go into town this morning. If, and I mean if, she agrees, she can come out for a few days, but that's all. Understand? Thank you! Clara launched herself at him, nearly knocking over his coffee. Thank you, thank you, thank you! Eli started jumping up and down. Miss Vale's coming! Miss Vale's coming! Rowan caught Mrs. Chen's eye across the room. The old woman was smiling, just barely, like she'd known this was coming all along. You're all goddamn impossible, he muttered. But Clara was hugging him and Eli was laughing, and for the first time in 3 years, the house sounded like something other than a tomb. Rowan rode into Black Ridge under a sky heavy with snow that hadn't fallen yet. He hated town, hated the looks people gave him, part respect, part pity, part fear. Hated the way conversations stopped when he walked into rooms. Hated being the grieving widower, the tragic figure, the man everyone whispered about. Mostly he hated that they weren't wrong. The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, a simple building that looked cold even with smoke rising from its chimney. Rowan tied his horse and stood outside for a moment, wondering what the hell he was doing, asking a woman he barely knew to spend Christmas with his broken family. Brilliant plan. He knocked. Come in. The inside of the schoolhouse was warmer than he expected. Celine Vale stood at the front organizing books, her back to the door. She wore a simple dress, dark blue, practical. Her hair was pulled back but escaping in places, curling slightly. I'll be with you in just a moment. She turned and stopped. Oh, Mr. Cross. Miss Vale. They stood looking at each other in awkward silence. She was younger than he remembered, mid-20s maybe, not beautiful. Her face was too angular, her mouth too wide, her eyes too direct. But there was something about her, a quietness, a strength that didn't announce itself. Is something wrong with Clara or Eli? She asked. No, they're fine. Well, Eli's got a cough, but nothing serious. That's good. More silence. Rowan had faced down cattle thieves, survived blizzards, negotiated contracts with men who'd kill you for $1, but standing in this schoolhouse trying to invite a woman to Christmas was somehow harder than all of that. My daughter asked me to come. Clara? She seems to think you're spending Christmas alone. Celine's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. That's kind of her to worry. Is it true? Is what true? That you'll be alone. She lifted her chin slightly. I'll be fine, Mr. Cross. I'm used to it. The words came out steady, but Rowan heard what was underneath them. Pride. The kind of pride you developed when accepting help felt like admitting defeat. He recognized it because he wore the same armor himself. Look, I'm not good at this, he said. But my children, Clara especially, they want you to come out to the ranch for Christmas. Few days, maybe. You'd have your own room. Mrs. Chen's a good cook, and... He trailed off. And? She prompted. And I'd appreciate it if you'd say yes, because if you don't, Clara's going to be heartbroken, and I've already broken that kid's heart enough for one lifetime. The honesty surprised both of them. Celine studied him for a long moment. Rowan had the uncomfortable feeling she was seeing right through every wall he'd built. Why? She asked finally. I told you, Clara. No, why does Clara want me there? Rowan shifted his weight. She thinks nobody should be alone at Christmas. That's a kind thought. She's a kind kid. He paused. Too kind for her own good sometimes. You say that like it's a flaw. On the frontier, it can be. Is that what you're teaching her? That kindness is a weakness? The question hit hard. I'm teaching her to survive. There's a difference between surviving and living, Mr. Cross. The way she said it, like she knew that difference intimately, like she'd spent years on the wrong side of it, made something shift in Rowan's chest. So, is that a yes or a no? Celine looked around the schoolhouse, at the decorations she'd hung for children who'd already left, at the empty desks, at the life she'd built that fit in a space barely bigger than his barn. I don't want charity, she said quietly. It's not charity. It's complicated. But it's not charity. Then what is it? Rowan met her eyes. Honestly, I think my kids need you there, and I think... He stopped, surprised by what he was about to say. I think maybe you need it too. The words hung in the cold air. Celine's hands tightened on the book she was holding. For a moment, Rowan thought she'd say no, thought she'd retreat behind that wall of pride and he'd have to go home and disappoint his children. Then she said, "When would I need to be there?" "Tomorrow morning. I'll send a wagon." "I can ride. In this weather?" "I've ridden in worse." Of course she had. Women didn't survive alone on the frontier by being delicate. "Tomorrow then," Rowan said. "Dawn. I'll have Miguel meet you at the edge of town." "All right. All right." They stood there another moment, both of them clearly uncomfortable, neither sure how to end this. Finally, Celine said, "Thank you for asking." "Thank Clara." "I will." Rowan nodded and left before he could say something stupid. Outside, the first flakes of snow were starting to fall. He mounted his horse and rode back toward the ranch, wondering what the hell he'd just set in motion. Behind him, in the schoolhouse, Celine stood at the window and watched him go. Her hands were shaking. She'd said yes. Actually said yes. To Christmas with a family she barely knew, in a house she'd never seen, with a man whose reputation preceded him like winter wind, Rowan Cross. The rancher everyone respected and half the town feared. The widower who'd closed himself off so completely, people whispered about it. The father raising 2 children alone and probably making a mess of it. And she'd said yes. Not because she wanted charity. God, she'd rather freeze than accept pity. But because when he'd said, "I think maybe you need it too," something inside her had cracked open. Some wall she'd built to protect herself from wanting things she couldn't have. And because for just a moment, standing in his daughter's schoolhouse, Rowan Cross had looked at her like she was a person instead of just the town's schoolteacher. Like maybe she mattered. Celine locked the schoolhouse and walked back to her room through falling snow. She had one day to prepare. One day to figure out what the hell you brought when a stranger invited you to Christmas out of what was probably obligation and certainly pity, no matter what he said. One day to decide if she was brave enough to want something more than survival. The snow fell harder. Somewhere in the mountains, a storm was building, and Celine Vale stood at her window watching darkness come and wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life, or the first right choice in 10 years. The wagon arrived before dawn. Celine heard it before she saw it, the creak of wheels on frozen ground, the snort of horses, the jingle of harness in the pre-dawn darkness. She'd been awake for hours anyway, sitting by her window watching the street below, her single trunk packed and ready by the door. She'd barely slept, kept second-guessing herself, kept thinking about turning up at the Cross Ranch and realizing she'd made a terrible mistake, that Rowan had only asked because his daughter guilted him into it, that she'd spend Christmas being pitied by people who didn't want her there. But she'd said yes. And Celine Vale didn't go back on her word. She pulled on her coat, grabbed her trunk, and headed downstairs. Mrs. Fletcher was already up, starting the stove for the day's baking. "Off then?" the older woman asked, not quite meeting Celine's eyes. "Just for a few days." "The Cross Ranch." Mrs. Fletcher shook her head. "That's a hard house, dear. Don't expect it to be easy." "I don't expect anything to be easy." "No. I suppose you wouldn't." There was something in the woman's tone, pity mixed with something else. Relief, maybe. Like she was glad someone else would carry the burden of the town's lonely schoolteacher for a few days. Celine stepped outside into cold so sharp it stole her breath. Miguel Reyes sat on the wagon bench, reins in his gloved hands. He was maybe 40, weathered, with kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. "Morning, Miss Vale." "Mr. Reyes." "Just Miguel's fine." He climbed down, took her trunk, lifted it into the wagon bed like it weighed nothing. "Ready for the ride. It's about an hour in good weather. This weather—" He glanced at the sky. "We'll see." Celine climbed up. Miguel clicked to the horses and they started moving, leaving Black Ridge behind as the first gray light touched the eastern horizon. For a while, neither of them spoke. The wagon rattled over frozen ruts, headed into country Celine had never seen. Rolling grassland disappearing into foothills, pine forests dark against the snow, mountains rising in the distance like broken walls. Beautiful and brutal at the same time. "Boss said you're a teacher," Miguel said finally. "That's right. Good profession. Honest work." "Most days." He smiled slightly. "My daughter Lucy's in your school, 7 years old, talks about you all the time." Celine remembered her, small, bright-eyed, always asking questions. "She's a smart girl." "Takes after her mother." Miguel paused. "Look, Miss Vale, I'm going to say something, and I hope you don't take it wrong. All right. The Cross Ranch. It ain't like other places. Mr. Rowan, he's a good man, fair employer, takes care of his people. But since Mrs. Sarah died, Miguel shook his head. That house has been hurting, and those kids, Clara and Eli, they've been hurting worse. I know. Do you? He looked at her directly. Because I'm not sure you know what you're walking into. That house stopped being a home 3 years ago. It's more like a museum now. Everything frozen exactly how it was the day she died. And Mr. Rowan, he won't let anybody change nothing, won't let anybody even talk about her. Then why did he invite me? Because Clara wore him down. That little girl, she's got her mama's stubbornness, and she's been worried about you being alone. The words landed soft but heavy. I don't need anyone's pity. Ain't about pity. Miguel guided the horses around a fallen branch. Clara she's got a big heart. Too big for her own good sometimes. And I think she sees something in you that reminds her of herself. What's that? Loneliness. Celine looked away, throat tight. They rode in silence for a while. The sun came up slow, turning the snow from gray to white to gold. The landscape opened up, vast and empty and so beautiful it hurt. How long have you worked for Mr. Cross? Celine asked. 15 years. Started when his father still ran the place. Old man Cross was hard as iron, made Rowan look soft by comparison. Hard to imagine. Miguel laughed. Yeah, but it's true. Rowan's father, he believed a man showed strength by never showing weakness. Never smile, never cry, never let anyone see you hurting. Just work until you drop and get up and work some more. Sounds awful. It was, but that's how Rowan was raised. Then he married Sarah and, man, she changed him, made him softer, better, taught him how to laugh again, how to be gentle with his kids, how to run a ranch without running it into the ground. And then she died. Yeah. Miguel's voice went quiet, and I watched all that softness die with her. Watched him turn back into his father. Watched him lock himself away so deep, I don't know if he's ever coming back out. The wagon crested a hill, and there it was. The Double Cross Ranch spread across the valley below like something out of a painting. The main house sat at the center, 2 stories, white clapboard, wraparound porch, smoke rising from multiple chimneys. Around it clustered barns, outbuildings, corrals, workers' cabins. Cattle dotted the distant pastures. Fences stretched toward the tree line. It was magnificent, and somehow, even from a distance, it looked empty. Welcome to the Cross, Miguel said softly. They descended into the valley as the sun climbed higher. Ranch hands looked up from their work as the wagon passed, curious glances, nods of greeting. Celine felt their eyes on her and knew what they were thinking. Who's the woman? Why's she here? How long's she staying? The main house loomed closer. Up close it was even more impressive, well-built, well-maintained, expensive. The kind of house that represented years of hard work and success. But the windows looked dark despite the morning light. Miguel pulled up in front and helped Celine down. The front door opened before they reached it. Mrs. Chen stood there, small, gray-haired, sharp-eyed. She looked Celine up and down like she was evaluating livestock. So, you came. I was invited. Yes, you were. Mrs. Chen stepped aside. Come in then. Let's see if you survive the first hour. Not exactly a warm welcome. Celine stepped inside and stopped. The house was beautiful. Hardwood floors, high ceilings, furniture that looked expensive and comfortable. A staircase curved upward to the second floor, paintings on the walls, rugs that probably cost more than Celine made in a year. But Mrs. Chen was right. It felt frozen. Everything was too clean, too perfect, too untouched. Like a house nobody actually lived in. Like a stage set waiting for actors who'd never arrive. And over the mantel in what was clearly the main sitting room hung a portrait of a woman Celine had never met but recognized immediately. Sarah Cross. Dark hair, gray eyes, slight smile. Pretty in an understated way. Young. Couldn't have been more than 24 when it was painted. Celine stared at the portrait and felt something cold settle in her stomach. She was a guest in a dead woman's house. Miss Vale! Clara came running down the stairs, Eli right behind her. The girl's face was lit up with genuine joy. No pretense, no politeness, just pure happiness. You came. I told Papa you'd come, but he said maybe you wouldn't want to, and I said you would. And Clara, breathe, Mrs. Chen said dryly. Clara grabbed Celine's hand. Come see your room. It's upstairs. It's got a window that looks at the mountains and everything. Before Celine could respond, she was being pulled up the staircase by a 9-year-old who clearly hadn't learned the meaning of the word subtle. Eli followed, quieter, but smiling. I'm glad you're here, Miss Vale. Thank you, Eli. The second-floor hallway was long, lined with doors. Clara dragged Celine to the third one on the right and threw it open. Here! The room was simple but comfortable. A bed with a quilt, a washstand, a chair by the window, a small wardrobe. Not luxurious, but far nicer than Celine's room above the mercantile. And Clara was right. The window looked out over mountains that took her breath away. Do you like it? Clara asked anxiously. It's perfect. Really? Really? The girl's whole body relaxed. I was worried you wouldn't like it. Mrs. Chen said we should put you in the guest room on the other side, but I said this one's better because the view and… Clara, Rowan's voice came from the doorway. Let Miss Vale settle in. He stood there in work clothes, worn jeans, flannel shirt, boots that had seen 1,000 miles. His hair was slightly mussed, his jaw shadowed with stubble. He looked tired. Sorry, Clara mumbled. Don't apologize. Just give her some space. The children left reluctantly. Rowan lingered a moment, one hand on the doorframe. Thank you for coming. You already thanked me. Yeah, well, Clara would have made my life hell if you didn't. Almost a smile. Not quite, but closer than Celine had seen from him before. Your house is beautiful, she said. Something flickered across his face. It was. Once. He left before she could respond. Celine stood alone in the guest room and wondered what the hell she'd gotten herself into. Downstairs, breakfast was waiting. The dining room was another beautiful frozen space. Long table that could seat 12, chandelier overhead, windows overlooking the front yard. Places were set at one end, food laid out on the sideboard. Celine sat where Mrs. Chen indicated. Rowan took the head of the table. Clara and Eli sat across from Celine, barely able to contain their excitement. We don't usually have guests, Eli announced. Eli, Rowan said quietly. Well, we don't. That doesn't mean you announce it. Why not? Because it's rude. How's it rude if it's true? Rowan looked like he was developing a headache. Celine hid a smile. Breakfast was simple but good. Eggs, bacon, biscuits, coffee that was actually hot. After weeks of eating alone in her room, sitting at a table with other people felt strange. Good strange, but strange. Miss Vale? Clara said suddenly. Did you have brothers and sisters? Clara, Rowan warned. What? I'm just asking. I had a brother, Celine said quietly. Older. His name was Jacob. Where is he now? I don't know. The table went quiet. He left when I was 16, Celine continued, surprising herself. Said he'd send for me once he got established. That was 10 years ago. Did he die? Eli asked bluntly. Eli! It's all right, Celine said. I don't know if he died. Maybe. Probably. The mountains are dangerous. Clara's eyes were huge. So you've been alone since you were 16? More or less? That's awful. It's survival. Rowan was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not pity, something else. Recognition, maybe. What about your parents? Clara pressed. Clara, that's enough questions, Rowan said firmly. But enough. Clara subsided, looking mutinous. But Celine appreciated the intervention. She didn't mind talking about her past, but there were only so many old wounds she wanted to reopen over breakfast. After they ate, Rowan disappeared outside to work. Mrs. Chen started cleaning up. Clara and Eli looked at Celine expectantly. Want to see the ranch? Clara asked. If that's all right? It's all right. Come on. The next hour was a whirlwind tour led by two children who clearly didn't get many opportunities to show off. They took Celine everywhere. The barns where horses stamped and snorted, the chicken coop where hens scattered at their approach, the workshop where tools hung in neat rows, the bunkhouse where ranch hands lived. Everyone they passed nodded politely, but Celine felt their curiosity. The teacher from town, the woman the boss invited for Christmas. What's she doing here? How long's she staying? questions she didn't have answers to. "That's Papa," Eli said suddenly, pointing. Across the yard, Rowan stood with Miguel examining a fence section. Even at a distance, Celine could see the way he moved. Economical, efficient, like a man who never wasted energy. He glanced up, saw them watching, raised one hand in acknowledgement. "Papa works all the time," Clara said quietly. "Someone has to run the ranch." "Yeah, but he works all the time, even when he doesn't have to. Mrs. Chen says he's trying to work himself to death." Clara: "Well, she does say it. I heard her tell Miguel." Celine didn't know how to respond to that. They ended up back at the house as afternoon shadows started stretching across the snow. Inside, Mrs. Chen was preparing dinner, some kind of roast that smelled incredible. "You cook?" the old woman asked Celine. "Enough to survive." "Good. You can help tomorrow. I'm too old to be doing everything myself." It wasn't really a request. Celine found herself nodding. Dinner that night was quieter. Rowan looked exhausted, ate quickly, barely spoke. The children tried to fill the silence with chatter, but eventually even they ran out of steam. After the meal, Rowan disappeared into what Clara whispered was his office where he does the books. Mrs. Chen retired to her room. The children were supposed to go to bed, but Clara had other ideas. "Will you read to us?" she asked Celine. "Don't you have books?" "Yeah, but you read better. You do different voices." Eli nodded eagerly. "Please?" How could she say no? They settled in the sitting room, the one with Sarah's portrait watching from above the mantel. Clara brought down a battered copy of some frontier adventure story. Eli curled up on the sofa with his stuffed rabbit. Celine read, doing voices like Clara said, making the children laugh. She tried not to look at the portrait, but felt those painted eyes on her the whole time. She was halfway through a chapter when she noticed Rowan standing in the doorway. She didn't know how long he'd been there. He didn't come in, just stood there in the shadows, listening. His face was unreadable, but something about the way he held himself, shoulders tight, jaw clenched, suggested he was fighting some internal battle. Celine kept reading, finished the chapter, looked up to find the children both drowsy. "Bed," she said gently. "One more chapter," Clara mumbled. "Tomorrow. Promise?" "Promise." The children went upstairs reluctantly. Rowan still stood in the doorway. "Sorry," Celine said. "I didn't mean to keep them up." "You didn't." His voice was rough. "That was... Sarah used to read to them like that." The words hung in the air. "I can stop if it's..." "No." He stepped into the room finally. "No, they liked it. I just..." He looked at the portrait, then away quickly. "I haven't heard this house sound like that in 3 years." "Like what?" "Alive." Celine didn't know what to say to that. Rowan crossed to the fireplace, added a log even though the fire didn't need it. His back to her, he said, "I'm not good at this." "At what?" "Having people here. Letting people in. I got used to..." He stopped. Started again. "After Sarah died, it was easier to keep everything the same, keep everything frozen, because changing things felt like erasing her. I understand. Do you?" He turned to face her. "Because Clara thinks you do. Thinks you understand being alone." "I do understand that." "Yeah, I figured." He shoved his hands in his pockets. "Look, I need you to know something. I didn't invite you here out of pity. Your foreman said Clara wore you down. Miguel talks too much, but yeah, she did. But that's not..." He struggled for words. "Clara wanted you here because she sees something in you, something she recognizes. And I think maybe she's right." "About what?" "That you get it. What it's like to keep going when everything inside you wants to stop." The honesty caught Celine off guard. "I do know that," she said softly. Rowan nodded once. "Good. That's good. Because these kids, they need someone who gets it. Someone who understands that surviving isn't the same as living, but you do it anyway, because what else is there?" "Mr. Cross." "Rowan. If you're going to be here, just call me Rowan." "Rowan, then." She took a breath. "Your children are wonderful, and they're hurting, but they're not broken." "No?" "No, broken things can't love, and they love you so much it's almost painful to watch." He flinched like she'd hit him. I don't deserve that. Maybe not, but you have it anyway. They stood there in the firelight, two people who'd both learned to survive alone and didn't quite know how to do anything else. Finally, Rowan said, I should let you get some rest. All right. He started to leave, then stopped. Celine? It was the first time he'd used her name. Yeah? Thank you for coming, really. You already said that. I know, but I mean it. After he left, Celine sat alone in the sitting room looking at Sarah's portrait. The painted woman smiled down at her, forever young, forever present, forever impossible to compete with. Not that Celine was trying to compete. She was just here for a few days. A brief interruption in her usual loneliness. Then she'd go back to Black Ridge and this would all become a memory. That's what she told herself. But sitting there in that beautiful frozen house, listening to the fire crackle and the wind outside, and the quiet sounds of a family settling in for the night, Celine felt something dangerous stir inside her. Hope. The next morning she woke to Clara shaking her shoulder. Miss Vale, get up! It's snowing! Celine struggled awake. What? It's snowing! Real snow! Papa says if it keeps up we might get snowed in for days. The girl's excitement was infectious despite the early hour. Celine got dressed and went downstairs to find the household in organized chaos. Mrs. Chen was inventorying supplies. Miguel was securing outbuildings. Rowan stood on the porch watching the sky with an expression Selene was learning to recognize, calculating, planning, preparing for the worst. How bad? She asked, coming to stand beside him. Bad enough, he pointed north. See those clouds? That's a mountain storm. Could dump 3 feet before it's done. And we're stuck here. Yeah, you all right with that? Celine thought about her empty room above the mercantile, about spending Christmas alone like every other year. I'm all right with it. He glanced at her, something almost like relief in his eyes. Good. The snow fell steadily all day. By afternoon, it was past the porch steps. By evening, it reached the windows. Inside, the house transformed. Mrs. Chen put Celine to work in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, kneading dough, learning recipes the old woman had been making for 40 years. They didn't talk much, but there was a companionship in the work, a rhythm that felt almost comfortable. The children were everywhere, building blanket forts, playing games, tracking snow through the house until Rowan threatened to make them muck out stalls in punishment. You wouldn't, Clara said. Try me. But there was no heat in the threat. Selene watched him with his children and saw glimpses of the man Miguel had described, the one Sarah had brought out, the one capable of gentleness. He just didn't know how to access it anymore. That evening after dinner, Clara announced they needed to decorate for Christmas. Not tonight, Rowan said. Why not? Because I said so. That's not a reason. It's the only reason you're getting. Clara's face crumpled. Eli looked down at his plate. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Celine cleared her throat. I could help, if you want. Everyone looked at her. I used to decorate the schoolhouse every year, she continued. It's not much, but we don't need decorations, Rowan said flatly. Papa, please. I said no, Clara. The girl shoved back from the table and ran upstairs. A door slammed. Eli followed more slowly. Rowan sat at the table, jaw tight, staring at nothing. You should go after them, Celine said quietly. They'll get over it. Will they? Or will they just learn to stop asking you for things? His head snapped up. What? That's what Mrs. Chen said, wasn't it? That they're learning to stop asking because you always say no. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Celine leaned forward. I know what it's like to lose people. I know what it's like to have everything taken from you. And I know what it's like to build walls so high nobody can reach you anymore. This isn't about walls, isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, you've turned this entire house into a fortress, and your children are trapped inside it with you. I'm protecting them. From what? Life? Joy? The possibility of being happy again? Rowan stood abruptly. You've been here 2 days. Don't presume to tell me how to raise my children. Someone needs to, because right now you're not raising them. You're just making sure they survive. And survival isn't enough. The words hit like bullets. Rowan's face went white, then red. Get out. What? Get out of this room before I say something I'll regret. Celine stood, heart pounding. Fine. But you should know something first. What? Your wife? The woman in that portrait? I never met her, but I'm pretty sure she wouldn't want this. Wouldn't want her children growing up in a museum dedicated to her memory. Wouldn't want you turning into your father. Rowan's hands clenched into fists. You don't know anything about my wife. You're right, I don't. But I know about loneliness, and I know that those kids upstairs are lonely even though you're right here. Think about that. She left before he could respond. Upstairs, she found Clara crying into her pillow, Eli sitting beside her looking miserable. He hates us, Clara sobbed. He doesn't hate you. Then why won't he let us have Christmas? Why won't he let us be happy? Celine sat on the bed, pulled Clara into her arms. Because he's scared. Of what? Of losing you. Of loving you too much and having something take you away like it took your mother. That's stupid. Maybe. But grief makes people do stupid things. Eli climbed into Celine's lap. Do you think Mama would want us to have Christmas? The question broke Celine's heart. I think your mama would want you to be happy. I think she'd want your father to be happy too. He's never happy anymore, Clara whispered. I know, sweetheart, I know. She held them both until they cried themselves out. Read to them until they fell asleep. Covered them with blankets and stood looking down at two children who deserved so much better than the cards they'd been dealt. When she came back downstairs, the sitting room was empty. The fire burned low. Snow pressed against the windows. Celine started to head to her room, then stopped. Hanging on the wall were several paintings, landscapes, mostly, but one caught her eye. A family portrait, smaller than the one over the mantel. Rowan and Sarah, younger, with baby Clara between them. They looked happy, truly happy. That was 6 months before Eli was born. Celine turned. Rowan stood in the doorway to his office, whiskey glass in hand. He looked wrecked. You looked happy, she said. We were. He came into the room slowly. For a while. Then, he gestured vaguely. Then life happened. Yeah. He drank. I'm sorry for before. I shouldn't have. You weren't wrong. I've been here 2 days. I don't have the right to judge how you're handling things. But you're not wrong either. He sank into a chair. I am turning into my father. I can feel it happening, and I don't know how to stop it. Celine sat across from him. Do you want to stop it? I don't know. Some days I think it's easier this way. Safer. If I don't let myself feel anything, then nothing can hurt me. Nothing can hurt you, but nothing can make you happy either. I'm not sure I deserve to be happy. Why not? Because I wasn't here. The words came out raw. When Sarah died, I wasn't here. I was 3 days away pushing cattle through a pass because I wanted to close one more deal, make one more dollar, expand the ranch 1 more acre. And while I was gone, my wife died alone in the snow 50 feet from the barn. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? He looked at her with eyes full of old pain. The doctor said her heart was weak, said it could have given out any time. But what if I'd been here? What if I could have carried her inside faster, gotten her warm, done something? Then she probably still would have died, because you're not a doctor and you can't fix a weak heart with willpower. You don't know that. Yes, I do, because I watched my parents die of cholera, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do to stop it. I was 16 years old, and I tried everything: water, blankets, prayer, bargaining with whatever force runs the universe. And they died anyway, because some things can't be fixed. Some things just happen. Rowan stared at her. How do you live with that? Badly, most days. But I keep going because the alternative is giving up, and I'm too stubborn to give up. Almost a smile. Almost. Clara and Eli, he said quietly, they need more than I'm giving them. They need you, the real you, not the version you think you're supposed to be. I don't know how to be that anymore. Then learn. Start small. Let them decorate for Christmas. Let them be children instead of prisoners in their own home. He was quiet for a long time. Then, Sarah loved Christmas. Used to go overboard every year. Decorations everywhere. Presents piled under the tree. Special meals, the whole thing. After she died, it hurt too much. So you took it away from your children too. I thought I was protecting them. You were protecting yourself. They just got caught in the crossfire. The truth of it hung between them. Finally, Rowan stood. Tomorrow. We'll decorate tomorrow, if the storm lets up enough to cut down a tree. Really? Don't make me regret this. But there was something different in his face now, something that hadn't been there before. Permission to try. Celine stood as well. They were close enough that she could smell whiskey and wood smoke and snow on his clothes. Thank you, she said. For what? For letting me in. Even just a little. He looked at her for a long moment. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know, someone softer, someone who'd treat me with kid gloves because of what I've been through. I don't do kid gloves. No, you don't. Almost a smile. I'm starting to see why Clara likes you so much. She's a good kid. Yeah, she is. He hesitated. Celine, whatever he was going to say, got cut off by a huge crash from upstairs, followed by Eli's wail. They both ran, found the boy on the floor of his room, having fallen out of bed. He was crying, feverish, coughing hard enough to make his small body shake. Rowan scooped him up. He's burning up. Mrs. Chen appeared in her nightgown. How long has he been like this? I don't know. He was fine at dinner. Fever comes on fast sometimes. She felt Eli's forehead, frowned. We need to get this down. Cool water, willow bark if we have it. The next hour was chaos. They worked together, Rowan holding his son, Celine fetching water, Mrs. Chen grinding medicine. Clara stood in the doorway, watching with terrified eyes. Finally, the fever broke enough that Eli stopped shaking. He fell into an exhausted sleep, curled against his father's chest. He needs rest, Mrs. Chen said, and watching. Fever might come back. I'll stay with him, Rowan said immediately. You need sleep too. You're no good to him dead on your feet. I'm not leaving him. Mrs. Chen looked at Celine. You any good at nursing? I've done my share. Good. You and Rowan take shifts, 4 hours each. Wake me if anything changes. After she left, Celine helped Rowan get Eli settled in bed. The boy looked so small, so fragile. His breathing was labored but steady. He's always been weak, Rowan said quietly. Born a month early, spent the first year of his life sick more than healthy. Sarah used to sit up with him night after night, never complaining. You're sitting up with him now. Yeah, but I'm terrified. What if I miss something? What if he gets worse and I don't know what to do? Then you call Mrs. Chen, or me. You're not alone in this. He looked at her with something that might have been gratitude. Take the first shift, Celine said. I'll relieve you in 4 hours. She went to her room but didn't sleep. Couldn't stop thinking about that little boy struggling to breathe, about Rowan's fear, about this family that had already lost so much. 4 hours later, she returned to find Rowan slumped in the chair beside Eli's bed, half asleep but still watching his son with vigilant eyes. Go, she said softly. I've got him. If anything changes, I'll get you immediately. Go sleep. He left reluctantly. Celine settled into the chair, watching Eli's small chest rise and fall. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside this room, a child fought fever, and a stranger kept watch because someone had to. She must have dozed because suddenly it was dawn and Eli was stirring. Miss Vale? Hey, sweetheart, how do you feel? Thirsty. She helped him drink. His fever had dropped, but he still felt warm. Where's Papa? Sleeping. You scared him pretty bad last night. I didn't mean to. I know, sometimes our bodies do things we can't control. Eli was quiet for a moment, then, Are you going to leave after Christmas? The question caught her off guard. Probably. I have to get back to town eventually. But you could stay if you wanted. Eli, we like you. Even Papa likes you, I can tell. It's complicated. Why? How did you explain to a 6-year-old that you couldn't just move into someone else's life no matter how much you might want to? Because I have a job in town. And this is your family, not mine. You could be family, though, if you wanted. Celine's throat closed up. That's not how it works, sweetheart. Why not? Before she could answer, Rowan appeared in the doorway. He looked rumpled, exhausted, but his eyes went straight to his son. How is he? Fever's down. He's talking, which is good. Rowan crossed to the bed, felt Eli's forehead, visibly relaxed. You gave us a scare, buddy. Sorry, Papa. Don't be sorry. Just stay in bed today. All right? Let yourself heal. After breakfast, which Eli couldn't eat much of, the storm finally began to ease. The snow stopped falling. Weak sunlight filtered through gray clouds. Clara bounced into the kitchen where Celine was helping Mrs. Chen. Papa says we can get a tree. He says if the snow's not too deep, we can go this afternoon. The girl's excitement was contagious. Even Mrs. Chen smiled. Better bundle up, the old woman said. Going to be cold out there. That afternoon, Celine found herself trudging through thigh-deep snow behind Rowan and Clara. Miguel had stayed behind with Eli, who'd been devastated to miss the excursion. The forest was transformed by snow, silent, white, almost magical. Every branch weighted down, every surface covered. How about this one? Clara asked, pointing to a pine. Too small. That one? Too crooked. Papa, you're impossible. I'm particular. There's a difference. They went deeper into the woods. Celine fell back, watching father and daughter bicker good-naturedly about tree selection. This was different from the tense, careful interactions she'd seen before. This felt almost normal. What do you think, Miss Vale? Clara called. Celine caught up to where they stood before a perfect pine, tall, full, symmetrical. It's beautiful. See, Papa? Miss Vale agrees. Rowan looked at Celine, something unreadable in his expression. All right, this one. He set to work with an axe, powerful strokes that sent chips flying. Clara chattered the whole time about how they used to decorate when her mother was alive, and Celine watched Rowan's face carefully, but he didn't shut her down. Let her talk. Progress. Getting the tree back to the house took all of them. By the time they wrestled it inside, they were covered in snow and pine needles and laughing. Actually laughing. Mrs. Chen shook her head at the mess, but her eyes were soft. They spent the evening decorating, Clara directing everything, Rowan following orders with surprising patience, Celine helping where she could. Even Eli came down for a while, wrapped in blankets, watching from the sofa. And slowly, impossibly, the house began to transform. No longer frozen, no longer a museum. It started to feel alive. The tree stood in this corner of the sitting room, strung with paper chains Clara had made and candles they'd light on Christmas Eve. It wasn't fancy, nothing like what Celine imagined Sarah would have done, but it was real. Present. A living thing in a house that had been dead too long. Rowan stood back, hands in his pockets, staring at it like he wasn't sure whether to feel proud or terrified. It's crooked, he said finally. It's perfect, Clara corrected, adjusting a paper star she'd hung too low. It leans to the left. Papa, stop criticizing. Miss Vale, tell him to stop. Celine looked between father and daughter, both stubborn as mules in completely different ways. I think it has character. See, Clara beamed, character. Rowan's mouth twitched, almost a smile. He caught Celine's eye and something passed between them. An understanding, maybe. An acknowledgement that this small thing, this crooked tree in a house that had forbidden Christmas for 3 years, mattered more than either of them wanted to admit. That night, Celine lay in bed listening to the house settle around her. Footsteps on the stairs, a door closing. The creak of old wood adjusting to temperature changes. Sounds of life that were becoming familiar. Dangerous, that familiarity. Because in 4 days, she'd have to leave this behind. Go back to her empty room, her solitary existence, her careful walls that kept her safe from wanting things she couldn't have. 4 days. She tried not to think about it. The next morning dawned clear and brutally cold. Celine woke to find frost patterns on her window, so intricate they looked painted. She dressed quickly, shivering, and headed downstairs. The kitchen was already warm. Mrs. Chen stood at the stove, and to Celine's surprise, Rowan sat at the table with a count book spread before him, a cup of coffee steaming at his elbow. Morning, he said without looking up. Morning? You're up early. Ranch doesn't run itself, Mrs. Chen snorted. Ranch would run fine if you let Miguel handle things for 1 day, but no, you have to check every fence post personally. Someone has to. Someone does. His name is Miguel. You hired him to be foreman, let him forage. Foreman, not... Rowan stopped. Did you just say forage? I meant manage. You said forage. My English is better than your Cantonese, so don't start with me. Celine hid a smile as she poured herself coffee. The old woman and Rowan had a dynamic that was part employer-employee, part something closer to family. Mrs. Chen had been here long enough that she'd earned the right to speak her mind, and Rowan respected her enough to take it. Most of the time. "Where are the children?" Celine asked. "Still sleeping. Let them. Eli needs the rest, and Clara was up half the night rearranging ornaments on that tree." "I heard her," Rowan muttered. "Thought we had mice in the walls." "You could have told her to go to bed." "And deal with the argument?" "No, thank you." Mrs. Chen set a plate of eggs and biscuits in front of him. "You're getting soft." "I'm being practical." "You're being a father. Finally." Rowan looked like he wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. He ate instead, jaw tight. Celine sat across from him, studying the account books upside down. Numbers everywhere, careful notations in precise handwriting. "You keep the books yourself?" she asked. "Don't trust anyone else with them." "Not even Miguel?" "Miguel's good with cattle, not numbers." "What about your wife? Did she help?" The question came out before Celine could stop it. The temperature in the room dropped. Rowan set down his fork carefully. "Sarah handled the household accounts. I managed the ranch finances." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's fine." But his voice said it wasn't fine. "She was good at it. Better than me at making the numbers work when times got tight. After she died, I took over everything." "That must have been hard." "Everything was hard." He pushed the books away. Still is, some days. Mrs. Chen refilled his coffee without comment, but her eyes were sharp, watching, evaluating. Clara appeared in the doorway, hair tangled from sleep, still in her nightgown. "Is it Christmas yet?" "2 more days," Rowan said. "That's forever. That's 48 hours. Like I said, forever." She climbed into the chair next to Celine. "What are we doing today?" "You are staying inside where it's warm," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "Temperature dropped below 0 last night. Nothing but frostbite and trouble out there." "But I'm bored." "Then find something to do inside. Read a book. Help me bake. Practice your letters." Clara made a face but didn't argue. After breakfast, she disappeared upstairs and returned with a slate and chalk, settling at the table to practice writing while Celine helped Mrs. Chen prepare bread dough. The morning passed quietly. Rowan worked on his books. Clara drew pictures between bouts of half-hearted letter practice. Eli came down around mid-morning, still pale, but his fever completely gone, and immediately wanted to help with whatever Celine was doing. "You can watch," Celine said, settling him on a stool. "But no touching the hot things." "I know that. I'm 6, not stupid." "Eli," Rowan said without looking up from his ledgers. "Well, I'm not." 6-year-olds who talk back do chores in the barn. "It's too cold in the barn." "Then don't talk back." Eli subsided, but shot Celine a look that clearly said adults make no sense. She had to bite her lip to keep from laughing. Around noon, Miguel came to the door stamping snow off his boots. "Boss, we got a problem." Rowan was up immediately. "What kind of problem?" "North fence is down. Looks like a tree fell on it during the storm. We got maybe 20 head of cattle wandered through before we noticed." "How far?" "Can't tell yet. Snow's deep up there. We'll need to go looking." Rowan was already reaching for his coat. "Get the horses ready. You'll stay here," Mrs. Chen said flatly. "The hell I will." "You were up half the night with Eli. You're exhausted. Let Miguel and the boys handle it. It's my ranch, and it'll still be your ranch tomorrow. Those cattle aren't going anywhere in this snow. Send Miguel with a couple hands, have them track the herd, bring them back. You stay here and rest." Rowan looked mutinous. Miguel looked uncomfortable. Celine watched the standoff with interest. "Mrs. Chen is right," Miguel said finally. "You look like hell, boss. Meaning no disrespect, but you're no good to nobody if you collapse out there." "I don't collapse. First time for everything." Rowan opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the 3 of them watching him. Mrs. Chen implacable, Miguel concerned, Celine carefully neutral, and seemed to realize he was outnumbered. "Fine. Take Jackson and Tom. Track them. Count them. Bring them back. If you're not back by dark, I'm coming after you." "Fair enough?" Miguel headed out. After he left, Rowan stood by the window glaring at the snow like it had personally offended him. "You did the right thing," Celine said quietly. "Did I? Or did I just let someone else handle my responsibility?" "You delegated. That's what good leaders do." "Is that what you think I am? A good leader?" I think you're trying to be, and I think that's harder than actually being one. He glanced at her, surprised. You always this direct? Would you prefer I lie? No. Almost a smile. No, I wouldn't. The afternoon stretched long. With nothing urgent to do and nowhere to go, the household fell into an unusual rhythm, relaxed, almost lazy. Rowan gave up pretending to work on his books and played a half-hearted game of checkers with Eli. Clara helped Celine and Mrs. Chen bake cookies, getting flour everywhere and eating half the dough. It felt normal. Dangerously, impossibly normal. Celine kept catching herself forgetting this was temporary, kept having to remind herself that in 2 days she'd be gone, back to her real life, and all of this would become a memory she'd pull out on cold nights when loneliness got too heavy. She was rolling out dough when she heard it. Music, piano music. Her hands stilled. Mrs. Chen looked up sharply. In the sitting room, Rowan sat at the piano, the one that had been closed for 3 years, picking out a melody with hesitant fingers. It was simple, probably something Sarah had played, but he fumbled the notes like he was remembering from a long way off. Clara appeared in the kitchen doorway, eyes wide. Papa's playing Mama's piano. I hear that, Mrs. Chen said softly. He hasn't touched it since she died. They stood listening as Rowan worked through the piece, starting, stopping, starting again. His playing was rough, unpracticed, but there was something achingly beautiful about it, like watching someone try to reclaim something they thought was lost forever. Finally, he stopped. Silence filled the house. Then Eli's voice, small and wondering. That was nice, Papa. I'm out of practice. But it was still nice. More silence. Then the piano again. A different song this time. Still halting, but gradually growing more confident. Mrs. Chen turned back to the stove, but Celine saw her wipe her eyes quickly. That evening after dinner, Clara asked if Celine would read again. Different book, though, the girl said. We finished the other one. They settled in the sitting room like before. But this time when Celine started reading, Rowan didn't lurk in the doorway. He sat in a chair across the room, ostensibly looking at a cattle auction catalog, but Celine could tell he was listening. She read until both children's eyes started drooping. When she looked up, Rowan was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Bed, he said to the kids. 5 more minutes, Clara mumbled. Now. Surprisingly, they went without much argument. Rowan followed them upstairs to tuck them in, leaving Celine alone in the sitting room. She stood, stretched, went to the window. Outside, stars blazed in a clear sky, the kind of cold that made them look sharp enough to cut, beautiful and brutal at the same time. Thank you. She turned. Rowan stood in the doorway again, his default position apparently. For what? For being patient with them, for reading to them, for... He gestured vaguely. All of it. I like your children. They like you too. Maybe too much. Is there such a thing? He came into the room, moved to stand beside her at the window. They were close enough that Celine could feel warmth radiating from him, smell wood smoke and leather and something else she couldn't name. When you leave, he said quietly, it's going to hurt them. The words landed heavy. I know. Do you? Because Clara's already talking about you like you're staying, like you're part of this. And when you go back to town, she'll understand. Will she? She's 9 years old. She lost her mother. Now she's getting attached to you. And in a few days you'll be gone and she'll lose you too. That's not fair. No, it's not. But it's true. Celine turned to face him. What do you want me to do? Leave now? Pretend I was never here? I don't know what I want. His voice was rough. That's the problem. A week ago, my life made sense. It was hard and it hurt, but I understood it. Then you showed up and everything's complicated. I didn't mean to complicate anything. I know, but you did anyway. They stood looking at each other in the firelight. Outside the window, the world was frozen and still. Inside, something was shifting, tectonic plates moving beneath the surface, the kind of shift that changed landscapes forever. Rowan, don't! He stepped back. Don't say whatever you're about to say because I can't. I'm not ready for... He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Celine understood what he meant, understood that whatever was growing between them, this fragile, frightening thing, was moving too fast for a man who'd spent 3 years frozen solid. All right, she said softly. He nodded once and left. Celine stood alone by the window for a long time, watching her breath fog the glass. Christmas Eve arrived with more snow. Not a storm this time, just steady flakes that fell soft and endless. The ranch was buried under 4 feet of white. Miguel and his crew had brought the cattle back the day before, all accounted for, no losses. But now, everyone was truly snowed in. No getting to town, no leaving. Nowhere to go except deeper into whatever this was. The household woke early, restless with anticipation. Even Rowan seemed affected, less grim, more present. He helped Mrs. Chen prepare the holiday meal, took the children outside to build a snow fort, spent an hour fixing a loose hinge on the barn door that probably could have waited. Busy hands, Celine thought, keeping himself occupied so he didn't have to think. She understood the impulse. Mid-afternoon, Clara cornered her in the kitchen. "Miss Vale, can I ask you something?" "Of course." The girl looked uncharacteristically nervous. "Do you like it here, at the ranch?" Celine chose her words carefully. "I do." "Would you want to stay, if you could?" There it was. The question Celine had been dreading. "Clara, I know you have your job in town, but maybe you could teach here instead. We could fix up one of the cabins, and you could live there and see us all the time, and, sweetheart, it's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because I have responsibilities. A contract with the school. A room I rent. A life. But is it a good life?" Clara's eyes were too knowing for a 9-year-old. "Or is it just the life you're used to?" The question hit harder than it should have. "What brought this on?" Celine asked gently. "I heard Papa talking to Mrs. Chen. He said when you leave it'll be hard on us. On me and Eli." Clara's voice wavered. "But what about you? Will it be hard on you too?" Celine pulled the girl into a hug. "Yes, it will be hard on me too." "Then why do you have to go?" "Because staying would be—" "What? Impossible? Inappropriate? Too much like admitting she wanted something she had no right to want?" "Complicated." "Everything's complicated. That's what grown-ups always say when they mean they're scared." Out of the mouths of children. "You're too smart for your own good," Celine said. "That's what Papa says, too." Clara pulled back, wiping her eyes. "But Miss Vale, I want you to know something. Even if you leave, even if we don't see you again, I'm glad you came. You made Papa smile again, and our house feels like a home instead of a museum. Clara, I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I just wanted you to know that you matter, to us, to me." Then she ran off before Celine could respond. Celine stood in the empty kitchen, feeling like she'd been punched in the chest. That evening they gathered in the sitting room. The tree glowed with lit candles, their flames dancing in drafts from the windows. Mrs. Chen had prepared a feast: roast beef, potatoes, bread that was still warm, apple pie for dessert. They ate at the big table, all of them together, and for a few hours the house felt the way it probably had when Sarah was alive. Full, warm, alive. After dinner, Rowan surprised everyone by sitting at the piano again. "I'm not good," he warned, but Clara asked. He played carols, simple versions, fumbling in places, but recognizable. Clara sang along in a clear, high voice. Eli hummed. Even Mrs. Chen joined in eventually, her accent thick but her pitch perfect. Celine watched Rowan's hands on the keys, scarred, calloused, strong hands that were learning to be gentle again, and felt something crack open inside her chest. She was falling for him. Not the attraction she could dismiss as loneliness or proximity, not the gratitude for being included in something warm when her life had been cold for so long. Actual feelings. The dangerous kind. The kind that didn't go away when you left. After the children went to bed, later than usual, high on cookies and excitement, the adults sat around the dying fire. "I should turn in," Mrs. Chen said, but made no move to get up. "5 more minutes," Rowan said. "That's what you told Clara, and I was right then, too." They sat in comfortable silence. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, the house ticked and settled around them. "This was a good day," Mrs. Chen said finally. "The kind Sarah would have liked." Rowan didn't flinch at his wife's name, Progress. "Yeah, it was. She'd be happy," seeing the house alive again, seeing you trying. I'm not sure trying counts for much. It counts for everything. The old woman stood, bones creaking. Trying is how you start. Success comes later, or it doesn't. But you have to try first. After she left, Rowan and Celine sat alone by the fire. She's right, you know, Celine said, about trying. Easy for her to say. She's not the one failing. You're not failing. No? My daughter's getting attached to a woman who's leaving in 2 days. My son asked me tonight if you were going to be his new mama, and I'm sitting here wondering what the hell I'm doing inviting someone into this mess when I can barely handle it myself. Eli asked that? Right before bed, wanted to know if you were staying forever. Rowan's laugh was bitter. I told him no, that you had your own life. He cried himself to sleep. I'm sorry. Not your fault. It's mine. I should have thought this through. Should have realized. He stopped. Realized what? That it wasn't just the kids who'd get attached. The words hung between them. Celine's heart hammered. Rowan, don't. He stood abruptly. Please, don't say anything. Because if you say something kind right now, something understanding, I'm going to do something stupid like ask you to stay, and we both know that's impossible. Is it? Yes. He turned to face her. You have a job, a contract, a life in town, and I have a ranch to run and 2 children who need stability, not more upheaval. We're adults. We know how this works. Do we? We have to. He left before she could argue. Celine sat alone watching the fire burn down to embers. She should feel relieved. He'd drawn the line for both of them, made it clear this was temporary, saved them from making a mistake. So why did it feel like she just lost something she never had in the first place? Christmas morning dawned bright and painfully cold. Celine woke to Clara jumping on her bed. It's Christmas. Get up, get up, get up. Clara, it's barely dawn. Papa says we can open presents after breakfast. Come on. There was no arguing with a 9-year-old on Christmas morning. Downstairs, Rowan was already making coffee, looking like he'd slept about as well as Celine had. Which was to say, not at all. Their eyes met briefly. He looked away first. Breakfast was chaos. Eli could barely sit still long enough to eat. Clara chattered non-stop about what might be under the tree. Mrs. Chen tried to maintain order and failed spectacularly. Finally, Rowan gave up. All right, presents, before you vibrate through the floor. They gathered in the sitting room. Under the tree were packages wrapped in brown paper. Simple, practical, but clearly chosen with care. Clara distributed them with the efficiency of a tiny general. This one's for Eli. This one's for Papa. This one's for Mrs. Chen. And this one, she picked up a small package. This one's for Miss Vale. Celine blinked. I wasn't expecting. Just open it, Clara said impatiently. Inside was a handkerchief, simple white cotton with her initials embroidered in one corner. The stitching was careful, but clearly done by a child's hand. I made it, Clara said shyly. Mrs. Chen taught me the letters. It's beautiful. Really? Really? Celine hugged the girl, blinking back unexpected tears. The children tore through their presents. Books, a carved wooden horse for Eli, a new dress for Clara, practical things, but given with love. Mrs. Chen received a new shawl. Rowan got a pipe he'd probably never use but accepted with good grace. Then Clara handed Celine another package. This one's from Papa. Celine looked at Rowan in surprise. He shrugged, uncomfortable. Thought you should have something. Inside was a pair of gloves, soft leather, lined with fur, clearly expensive. The kind of gloves that would keep your hands warm even in the worst winter. Rowan, this is too much. Your gloves are falling apart. You need new ones. But just take them, please. She did, put them on. They fit perfectly. Thank you, she said softly. He nodded, throat working, and turned to help Eli with his new book. The day passed in a blur of food and laughter and small traditions. They played games, read by the fire, took a walk outside in snow so deep it reached Clara's waist. Eli had a snowball fight with his father that ended with both of them soaked and laughing. It was perfect. And it was ending. That night after the children were in bed and Mrs. Chen had retired, Celine found Rowan on the porch. He stood in the cold without a coat, staring at the stars. "You'll freeze," she said. "Can't feel it. That's how frostbite works." He smiled slightly. "Come to lecture me about self-care?" "Someone should." She stood beside him. The cold was brutal, but the sky was incredible. Stars so thick and bright they looked like snow suspended in darkness. "Tomorrow you'll need to head back," Rowan said. "Weather's clearing. Roads should be passable by afternoon." "I know." "The kids are going to be devastated." "I know that too." "Hell, I'm going to be—" He stopped. This was a mistake. Was it? Yes. No, I don't know. He turned to face her. "You came here for a few days at Christmas. That's all this was supposed to be, and somehow you managed to— To what?" "To make me remember what it feels like to want something other than survival." Celine's breath caught. "I can't ask you to stay," Rowan continued. "I have no right. You have your own life, your own plans, and this place, this family, we're a mess. We're broken. You deserve better than stepping into someone else's tragedy." "What if I don't want better? What if I want this?" "You don't know what you're saying." "Don't I?" "I've been alone for 10 years, Rowan. 10 years of surviving but not living, of watching other people's families and pretending I didn't want one of my own. And then I came here, and for the first time in a decade, I felt like I belonged somewhere." "Celine, I'm not asking for promises. I'm not asking for anything except honesty. Do you want me to stay?" The question hung in the frozen air. Rowan looked at her like she'd asked him to tear his heart out and hand it over. "Yes," he said finally. "Yes, I want you to stay. I want you to stay so badly it terrifies me. Because wanting things, caring about things, that's how you lose them. And I can't lose anyone else. I can't survive it." "So you're choosing to lose me now instead?" "Preemptively. I'm choosing to let you go before you get too tangled up in this mess to escape." "What if I don't want to escape?" "Then you're crazy." "Maybe I am." They stood staring at each other, both of them shaking, from cold or emotion or both. Then Rowan closed the distance between them and kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful. It was desperate and frightened and full of 3 years of loneliness, finally finding something that felt like light. Celine kissed him back just as fiercely, hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "That was stupid," Rowan said. "Probably. Doesn't change anything." "Doesn't it?" He rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know how to do this. Don't know how to let someone in without being terrified they'll leave. Then we figure it out together." "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple. But maybe it doesn't have to be impossible either." They stood wrapped together in the freezing dark, and for the first time since Sarah died, Rowan Cross let himself hope. They stayed on the porch until Celine's teeth started chattering and Rowan realized his hands had gone numb. Even then, neither wanted to move, like breaking apart would somehow undo what had just happened, send them back to being strangers pretending proximity didn't mean anything. But eventually, the cold won. Inside, the house was dark except for embers glowing in the fireplace. They stood in the front hall, suddenly awkward, the heat of the moment cooling into the reality of what came next. "I should—" Celine started. "Yeah." Neither moved. Rowan rubbed the back of his neck. "That kiss was a mistake?" "I was going to say complicated, but mistake works too." "Thanks for the clarity." "Celine, I didn't mean—" He stopped, frustrated. "I'm not good at this. At saying what I mean, Sarah used to translate for me. Said I had the emotional vocabulary of a fence post." Despite everything, Celine almost smiled. She wasn't wrong. No, she wasn't. He met her eyes. "But what I'm trying to say is that kiss wasn't a mistake. It was just, I don't know what to do with it. Don't know what happens now." "Nothing has to happen now. We can just—" A scream tore through the house. They both ran, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Clara's room. The girl was sitting up in bed, sobbing, caught in some nightmare she couldn't shake. "Sweetheart, I'm here." Rowan gathered her up. "You're safe. It's okay." "She was drowning. Mama was drowning, and I couldn't reach her." "It was a dream, just a dream." But it felt real. Celine stood in the doorway, unsure whether to help or leave. This was intimate family territory, not meant for outsiders. But then Clara saw her and reached out. Miss Vale. Celine crossed to the bed, let the girl grab her hand in a death grip. I'm here too. Don't leave. Please don't leave. I'm not going anywhere right now. They sat with her until the sobs subsided into hiccups, until her breathing evened out, until she fell back asleep still holding Celine's hand. Rowan's face in the lamplight looked wrecked. She has nightmares, he said quietly. Not as often anymore. But sometimes they come back. About your wife? About losing people? About being left alone? He looked down at his daughter. She found Sarah, did you know that? I was away and Clara came home from playing at a neighbor's and found her mother in the snow. 9 years old, and she tried to drag Sarah inside by herself before the ranch hands heard her screaming. Celine's throat closed up. I didn't know. Nobody knows. We don't talk about it. He stroked Clara's hair. She was in bed for weeks after. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't talk. The doctor said it was shock. Said we just had to wait it out. And eventually she came back. But pieces of her stayed broken. Rowan, and I did that to her. Me being gone, me not being here when she needed me, me leaving my wife to die alone in the snow 50 feet from safety. That's not fair. You didn't know it. Doesn't matter what I knew. What matters is what happened. And what happened is my daughter watched her mother die and I wasn't there to stop it. The grief in his voice was raw, ancient, the kind that had been festering for 3 years with nowhere to go. You can't carry that forever, Celine said softly. Can I? Seems like I've been doing a pretty good job so far. They stayed until Clara was deeply asleep, then carefully extracted themselves. In the hallway, Rowan leaned against the wall looking exhausted beyond words. This is why, he said. This is why I can't. Why we can't. Can't what? This, he gestured between them. Whatever this is. Because my children have already been through hell. They're fragile. And if they get attached to you and then something happens, if you leave, or if things don't work out, or if you push me away preemptively so they don't get hurt? Yes. Too late for that. They're already attached. I know, and that's my fault. I never should have invited you here. The word stung even though Celine understood what he meant. Right. Well, she wrapped her arms around herself. I'll leave first thing in the morning then. Save everyone the trouble. Celine, no, you're right. This was temporary. I knew that. Shouldn't have let myself forget it. She headed to her room before he could see the tears forming. Behind her, Rowan said her name again, but she didn't turn around. Couldn't. Because if she looked at him, she'd break completely, and she'd promised herself years ago she wouldn't fall apart over things she couldn't have. In her room, she packed. Didn't take long. She'd arrived with almost nothing, was leaving with barely more. The gloves Rowan had given her sat on the dresser. She picked them up, put them in her bag, took them out again. Keeping them felt presumptuous, like claiming something she had no right to. But leaving them felt worse. She was still holding them when she heard the knock. Go away, Rowan. It's Mrs. Chen. Celine opened the door. The old woman stood there in her nightgown and robe, sharp eyes taking in the packed bag, the gloves clutched in Celine's hands. Running away? Going home. There's a difference. Is there? Mrs. Chen came in uninvited, sat on the bed. Looks the same from where I'm standing. He doesn't want me here. He's terrified, not the same thing. Terrified of what? Of caring about someone again. Of being happy. Of stepping out of the shrine he built to his dead wife and admitting life goes on whether you want it to or not. Celine sat beside her. I can't fix him. Nobody asked you to fix him, but you could stand beside him while he fixes himself. He told me to leave. No, he told you it was complicated, which it is. But when has anything worth having ever been simple? You make it sound easy. It's not easy. It's terrifying. But you know what's worse than being terrified? Mrs. Chen looked at her. Being alone for the rest of your life because you were too scared to risk getting hurt. I've survived alone for 10 years. Survived, yes. But have you lived? The question echoed Clara's words from earlier, too knowing, too accurate. What do you want from me? Celine asked. I want you to stop running. I want you to admit you care about that stubborn man downstairs and his broken children. And I want you to fight for this instead of giving up the second it gets hard. What if I fight and lose anyway? Then at least you'll know you tried. Mrs. Chen stood. Sarah was my friend. I loved her like a daughter, but she's gone. And Rowan keeping this house as a memorial to her isn't honoring her memory. It's destroying what's left of her family. You could change that, if you're brave enough. After she left, Celine sat alone in the dark, wondering when exactly her life had gotten so complicated. She fell asleep still dressed, still on top of the covers, the gloves clutched in her hands. The crash woke her before dawn. Celine jerked upright, disoriented, heart racing, shouts from downstairs, footsteps running. Something was wrong. She grabbed her shawl and ran. The kitchen was chaos. Miguel stood by the door, wrapped in a coat covered in snow, his face grim. Rowan was pulling on boots, reaching for his rifle. Mrs. Chen hovered nearby, looking frightened. What's happening? Celine asked. Riders spotted north of here, Miguel said. 3, maybe 4, moving fast toward the winter pasture where we got the breeding stock. Thieves, Rowan said flatly. On Christmas night? Best time for it. Everyone's inside, full of food, not paying attention. He checked his rifle. Miguel, get Tom and Jackson. I'm coming with you, Miguel interrupted. You just rode in from checking the fences. You're exhausted. And you're planning to go after armed thieves alone? Not happening, boss. I don't have time to argue. Then don't argue. I'm coming. Rowan looked like he wanted to fight, but knew he didn't have the leverage. Fine. But we move fast and we stay together. Those cattle are worth a fortune. We can't afford to lose them. What about the children? Celine asked. They'll sleep through it. Rowan grabbed ammunition. Mrs. Chen will watch them. We'll be back before they wake up. And if you're not? He met her eyes. Then Miguel knows how to run the ranch. Everything's in the books in my office. Rowan, I have to go. Those are my cattle, my responsibility. He was out the door before she could argue. Miguel paused long enough to say, keep the doors locked. Anyone comes near the house who isn't us, you shoot first and ask questions later. Then he was gone too, leaving Celine and Mrs. Chen standing in the kitchen as hoofbeats faded into the darkness. This is bad, Mrs. Chen said quietly. How bad? Cattle thieves don't run from fights. They come armed and ready to kill anyone who gets in their way. And Rowan? He's stubborn. He won't back down, even if he should. Celine's stomach knotted. How long before they're back? Could be an hour, could be dawn. Depends on how far the thieves got. They waited as the sky slowly lightened. Mrs. Chen made coffee. Neither of them drank. Celine paced. Every sound outside made her jump. Wind rattling shutters, branches scraping the roof, her own imagination conjuring disasters. Clara appeared in the doorway around sunrise. Where's Papa? Out checking the cattle, Mrs. Chen said smoothly. He'll be back soon. Can I have breakfast? Of course, sweetheart. The girl ate without seeming to notice the tension. Eli came down next, still drowsy, and they settled the children with books while the adults tried to pretend everything was normal. But Celine kept watching the window, watching for riders that didn't come. An hour passed, then 2. This is taking too long, Mrs. Chen said finally. Maybe they had to track them farther than expected. Maybe. But neither of them believed it. Around mid-morning, they heard horses. Celine ran to the window, 2 riders approaching fast. Miguel and someone else. Not Rowan. She was outside before Mrs. Chen could stop her, running through snow that grabbed at her skirts. Miguel dismounted before his horse fully stopped. His face was pale, his coat torn, blood on his sleeve. Where is he? Celine demanded. There was a fight. The thieves were holed up in the old miner's cabin in the North Canyon. We tried to talk them out, but they started shooting. Rowan went around back to cut off their escape, and where is he? There was a collapse. Part of the cliff came down during the fight. Snow load was too heavy. Rowan was right under it when it went. Celine's world tilted. Is he alive? He was when I left. Trapped under rocks and snow, but breathing. I came back for help, for equipment to dig him out. But Miss Vale, that canyon, there's another storm coming, a big one. If we don't get him out in the next few hours, he'll freeze to death even if the rocks don't kill him. Then we go now. It's a 2-hour ride in good weather, in this snow with a storm coming. I don't care. Get me a horse. Miss Vale, you can't. I said get me a horse. Miguel looked at Mrs. Chen, who'd come outside wrapped in a shawl. The old woman nodded once. Get her a horse, and yourself a fresh one. Tom and Jackson are already headed back with digging equipment. You'll need to ride hard to catch up. The children? Celine started. Will be fine with me. Go bring their father home. Miguel saddled 2 horses while Celine changed into the most practical clothes she owned. Split skirt, heavy coat, the gloves Rowan had given her. Her hands shook so badly she could barely button her coat. He was trapped, alone, freezing. She'd kissed him last night, and now he might die before she could tell him she loved him. Wait, loved him? The realization hit like a fist to the chest. When had that happened? When had survival instinct and proximity turned into actual love? Somewhere between watching him play piano for the first time in 3 years and seeing him tuck his children into bed with a tenderness that broke through his armor. Somewhere between his rough honesty and his terrible fear of hoping for anything good. She loved him. And she was going to save him or die trying. The ride north was brutal. Snow deep enough to exhaust the horses, wind picking up, sky darkening with the promise of another storm. Miguel led the way, pushing hard, and Celine followed grimly. She wasn't a great rider, hadn't spent enough time on horses to be comfortable, but fear made her competent, and stubbornness kept her upright when her thighs screamed and her hands went numb despite the gloves. They caught up with Tom and Jackson an hour in. The 2 ranch hands looked surprised to see her but didn't argue, just turned and kept riding. The canyon was another hour beyond that, a narrow cut between cliffs where snow had drifted chest deep in places. They had to dismount and lead the horses, breaking trail through drifts that seemed to go on forever. Finally, Miguel stopped. There, ahead, the old miner's cabin sagged against the cliff face, and beyond it, a massive pile of rock and snow where part of the canyon wall had collapsed. "He's under that?" Celine asked, voice hollow. "Last I saw." Miguel raised his voice. "Boss, you still with us?" Silence. Then, faint. "Still here." Relief flooded through Celine, so intense she nearly collapsed. They ran forward, started digging. The ranch hands had brought shovels, pry bars, rope. They attacked the pile systematically, Miguel directing them to focus on the area where they could hear Rowan's voice. Celine dug with her bare hands when the shovel got stuck, ignoring the way rocks tore her skin, ignoring the cold, ignoring everything except the need to reach him. "Talk to us, boss," Miguel called. "How bad is it?" "Legs pinned, can't feel my feet, getting hard to stay awake." "Don't you dare fall asleep, you hear me?" "Trying." His voice was getting weaker. They dug faster. Celine's arms burned, her lungs screamed, her hands were bleeding. She didn't care. Behind them, the sky was turning the ugly gray-green that meant a serious storm. "We're running out of time," Tom said quietly. "Then dig faster," Celine snapped. They hit something solid, a boulder too big to move. They'd have to dig around it, under it, through spaces barely wide enough for hands. "Rowan," Celine called, "can you hear me?" "Celine?" His voice was confused. "What are you doing here?" "Saving your stubborn ass. Now stay awake." "Shouldn't have come. Dangerous." Little late for that advice. They worked in desperate silence, broken only by the scrape of shovels and ragged breathing. The storm was close now. Celine could feel it in the air, that electric pressure that meant snow was coming heavy and soon. Finally, they broke through. A gap barely wide enough to see through. On the other side, Rowan lay wedged between rocks, his face pale, his eyes unfocused. "Hey," Celine said, trying to keep her voice steady. "There you are. You're really here." "I'm really here. Stupid. Should have stayed at the ranch." "Probably. I'm making a habit of stupid decisions lately." Almost a smile. "Clara and Eli, are fine. Mrs. Chen's with them. They don't even know you're gone." "Good. That's good." His eyes started to close. "Rowan, stay awake!" "Tired. I know you're tired, but you have to stay with me, just a little longer." Miguel was already widening the gap, moving rocks with controlled urgency. "We're going to get you out, but you have to help us. Can you move at all?" "Legs stuck. We're going to try to shift this boulder. When we do, you pull yourself free. Understand?" "Yeah." They positioned the pry bars. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. The boulder shifted slightly. Rowan screamed, the first real sound of pain they'd heard from him. Again, Miguel ordered. They tried again. The boulder moved another few inches. Now, boss, pull! Rowan dragged himself forward with his arms, teeth gritted, face gray. His leg came free, and he collapsed. They hauled him out through the gap they'd created. His left leg was twisted wrong, clearly broken. His hands and feet were blue-white with frostbite. He was shaking so hard his teeth chattered. We need to get him warm, Celine said. Storm's here, Jackson said, pointing. The first flakes were already falling, not gentle Christmas snow, but the kind that came sideways and meant business. The cabin, Miguel decided. It's barely standing, but it's shelter. We'll wait out the worst of the storm, then head back. They carried Rowan to the cabin, trying to be gentle, but speed mattered more than comfort. Inside was one room, mostly intact, with a rusted stove and broken furniture. Tom got a fire started while Jackson tended the horses. Miguel checked Rowan's injuries with hands that knew what they were doing. Legs broken for sure, probably some ribs too, and he's hypothermic. We need to warm him up slow or his heart could give out. They wrapped him in blankets, positioned him near the fire but not too close. Celine sat beside him, chafing his hands, talking to keep him conscious. You're going to be fine. The storm will pass, and we'll get you home, and Mrs. Chen will dose you with terrible medicine, and you'll be back to being grumpy in no time. Not grumpy, he mumbled. You're incredibly grumpy. Practical. That's what grumpy people call themselves. His fingers tightened on hers. Shouldn't have come. So you keep saying. Mean it. Dangerous. Could have been killed. And you'd rather I let you freeze to death alone? Rather you safe. Well, too bad. I'm here and I'm not leaving. He looked at her with eyes that were starting to clear. Claire was right. You're stubborn. Takes one to know one. Outside, the storm hit in full force. Wind screamed through gaps in the cabin walls. Snow piled against the door. They were trapped. 4 people and 1 injured man in a structure that looked like it might collapse any second. But they had fire. They had shelter. And Rowan was alive. That was enough. The hours crawled past. Miguel checked Rowan's injuries again, splinted his leg with pieces of broken furniture and rope. The ranch hands took turns watching the fire, feeding it with wood scavenged from the cabin itself. Celine stayed beside Rowan, watching him drift in and out of consciousness. Every time his eyes closed, she feared they wouldn't open again. Every time he stirred, she felt relief so intense it hurt. Celine, he said at one point, I'm here. Last night, the kiss. You don't have to need to say this. While I can. He struggled to focus. I'm in love with you. Probably have been since you told me my house was frozen. Maybe before. And I'm terrified. Because everyone I love leaves or dies and I can't survive losing someone else. You're not going to lose me. You don't know that. No, but I know I love you too. And I know I'm not going anywhere. And I know that being terrified is a pretty terrible reason to give up on something good. He smiled, weak but real. When did you get so brave? About the same time you got yourself trapped under a rock slide. Didn't plan that. I should hope not. His eyes closed again. This time she let him sleep because his breathing was stronger and his color was better, and she could see his chest rising and falling steady and sure. The storm raged for hours. At some point, Celine dozed off, still holding Rowan's hand. She woke to find weak sunlight filtering through the gaps in the cabin walls, and Miguel standing over her. Storms passed. We should head back while we can. They fashioned a travois from branches and rope, got Rowan onto it as gently as possible. He was awake but quiet, jaw tight with pain every time they moved him. The ride back was slow, careful, exhausting. The horses struggled through fresh snow. Celine walked beside the travois, one hand on Rowan's shoulder, refusing to ride while he suffered below. It took twice as long as the ride out. By the time the ranch came into view, the sun was setting and Celine was so tired she was stumbling. But they'd made it. Mrs. Chen met them at the door, took one look at Rowan, and started issuing orders. They got him inside, into bed, called for the doctor from town. Even though the man probably couldn't make it through the snow for days, Claire and Eli were crying, clinging to their father, terrified by the blood and the splint and the way he could barely keep his eyes open. I'm okay, he told them. Just need rest. You're hurt, Clara sobbed. I've been hurt before, I'll heal. But what if you don't? What if you die like Mama? I'm not going to die. Miss Vale won't let me. Two pairs of eyes turned to Celine. Is that true? Eli asked. Will you make Papa better? Celine knelt so she was eye level with them. Your Papa's strong. Stronger than he thinks. And yes, I'm going to do everything I can to help him heal, but I need you two to be brave. Can you do that? They nodded, sniffling. Good. Now let Mrs. Chen work. She knows what she's doing. The next few days blurred together. Rowan developed a fever from the broken bones and the frostbite. His leg had to be reset, a process that involved him biting down on leather while Miguel pulled the bones back into alignment and Rowan screamed. Celine held his hand through all of it, wiped his face when the fever made him sweat, talked to him when delirium made him see things that weren't there. At one point he thought she was Sarah, called her by his dead wife's name, told her he was sorry, begged her not to leave. I'm not Sarah, Celine said gently. I'm Celine, and I'm not leaving. Celine, he focused on her with effort. You stayed. Of course I stayed. Thought you were going back to town. Plans changed. Good. His eyes closed. Don't want you to go. Then I won't. The doctor finally made it through on the third day. He examined Rowan, changed the splint, left laudanum for the pain, and stern instructions about rest. He's lucky, the doctor said. Another hour in that cold and he'd be dead, or we'd be amputating that leg. But he'll recover? If he rests and doesn't do anything stupid, which knowing Rowan Cross is asking a lot. By the 5th day, the fever broke. Rowan woke clear-eyed and alert for the first time since the accident. How long was I out? 5 days, Celine said. 5. He tried to sit up, groaned, fell back. The ranch is fine. Miguel's running things. Stop trying to get up or I'll tie you to this bed. You wouldn't. Try me. He subsided, studying her. You look terrible. Charming as always. When's the last time you slept? I sleep. Liar. She smiled tiredly. Someone had to watch you. Make sure you didn't die out of spite. Wouldn't give you the satisfaction. They sat in comfortable silence. Outside, Celine could hear the children playing in the snow, their laughter carrying through the window. I meant it, Rowan said finally. What I said in the cabin. About loving me? Yeah. Good. Because I meant it too. So what happens now? Now you heal, and we figure out the rest as we go. That simple? Nothing about this is simple, but maybe that's okay. He reached for her hand. Stay, please. Not just until I'm better. Stay. I already told you I'm not leaving. No, I mean really stay. Move to the ranch. Marry me. Be a mother to my children. Be... He stopped, struggling for words. Be the thing that makes this house alive again. Celine's heart hammered. Rowan, I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. But I also know I don't want to waste time being scared when I could be happy instead. So I'm asking, will you marry me? She looked at this broken, stubborn man who'd spent 3 years frozen solid and was finally thawing. At the future he was offering, messy and complicated and probably difficult. And she said yes. The word hung in the air between them, yes. And for a moment Rowan looked like he couldn't quite believe what he'd heard. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll stay. Yes to all of it. He pulled her down and kissed her, wincing when the movement jarred his broken ribs, but not letting go. When they broke apart, he was smiling, actually smiling, and it transformed his entire face. You're insane, he said. Probably, but so are you for asking. Fair point. A knock interrupted them. Clara stood in the doorway with Eli behind her, both children looking uncertain. Can we come in? Clara asked. Of course, Rowan said. They approached the bed cautiously, like he might break if they got too close. Eli climbed up carefully, settling against his father's good side. Clara sat on the edge, picking at the quilt. Are you really going to be okay? She asked quietly. Really. It'll take time, but I'll heal. You scared us. I scared myself. He looked at his daughter. I'm sorry. I should have been more careful. Miguel said you were being brave. That you saved the cattle and caught the thieves. Miguel talks too much. Did you, though? Catch them? Rowan sighed. The sheriff got them. They'll stand trial. And yes, we saved the cattle, so the ranch is fine. Everything's fine. Not everything. Clara met his eyes. You almost died. But I didn't. But you could have. Just like Mama. The room went quiet. Celine started to leave, give them privacy, but Rowan caught her hand. Stay. She stayed. Rowan took a breath, clearly choosing his words carefully. Your Mama's death, that was an accident. Something nobody could have prevented. This was different. I made choices, took risks, and yes, it went badly. But I'm here. I'm alive. And I'm going to be more careful from now on. Promise? Eli asked. Promise. What about Miss Vale? Clara asked. Is she staying? Rowan and Celine exchanged glances. Would you want her to stay? Rowan asked. Clara's face lit up. Really? Forever? If she wants to. If you want her to. We want her to. Eli bounced slightly, making Rowan wince. Right, Clara? Right. Clara looked at Celine with eyes that were too adult, too knowing. But only if you really want to stay, not just because Papa got hurt or because you feel bad for us. Smart kid. Too smart. I want to stay, Celine said. Your father asked me to marry him, and I said yes. Clara's mouth fell open. You're going to be our new mama? I'm going to be your stepmother, not a replacement for your mother. Nobody could replace her, but someone who loves you and wants to be part of your family. The girl launched herself at Celine, nearly knocking her over. Yes, 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 yes! Eli joined the hug, and suddenly Celine was wrapped in children and tears and laughter all at once. Over their heads she met Rowan's eyes and saw something in his face she hadn't seen before. Peace. The news spread through the ranch like wildfire. Miguel congratulated them with a knowing smile that suggested he'd seen this coming from the start. Mrs. Chen hugged Celine so hard her ribs hurt and whispered, "About damn time." The ranch hands were more reserved, but clearly pleased. Celine got the sense they'd been worried about Rowan, about the children, about the whole operation falling apart under the weight of grief. But telling the children and the ranch was easy compared to what came next, going back to Black Ridge to settle her affairs. 2 weeks after Rowan's injury, when he was strong enough to be left with Mrs. Chen's supervision, Celine made the trip to town with Miguel as escort. The roads were still difficult but passable, and she needed to give notice at the school, collect her things, close that chapter of her life. She told herself it would be simple. It wasn't. The schoolhouse looked smaller than she remembered. Mrs. Fletcher seemed unsurprised by the news. Frontier towns always knew everything before you told them, and was already spreading word about finding a new teacher. Figured you wouldn't be back, the woman said. The way you looked at those children, at that man. Some things you can't hide. Celine packed her few belongings, books, clothes, the small treasures she'd accumulated over 3 years of teaching. Everything fit in 2 trunks. Her entire life in Black Ridge reduced to 2 trunks. The school board meeting was harder. They accepted her resignation with stiff formality, making her feel guilty for abandoning her post mid-year even though they'd have done the same in her position. We trusted you, Mr. Brennan said. Brought you in, gave you steady work. And now you're leaving us in the lurch. I'm giving you notice. I'll help find a replacement. It's not about notice. It's about loyalty. Celine felt her temper spike. Loyalty? I taught your children for 3 years. I spent every Christmas alone because none of you ever thought to invite the lonely school teacher to your family dinners. I was good enough to educate your kids, but not good enough to actually be part of this town. So don't talk to me about loyalty. The men looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Brennan, who'd stayed silent until now, spoke up. She's right. We kept her at arm's length, and now we're surprised she's leaving? Miss Vale, I wish you well. You deserve happiness, and if you found it with Rowan Cross, then I hope you'll both be very content. The meeting ended shortly after. Celine walked out feeling lighter, like she'd said something that needed saying for 3 years. Her last stop was the mercantile to settle her account. Mr. Fletcher tallied up what she owed, accepted her payment, then surprised her by adding a bag of peppermint sticks. For the children, he said gruffly. Tell them congratulations on getting a new mother. Celine's throat tightened. Thank you. She left Black Ridge at dawn the next day. riding beside Miguel with her two trunks in the wagon behind them. She didn't look back. Some endings didn't need a final glance. Rowan was on the porch when they arrived, leaning on a crutch Mrs. Chen had fashioned from a tree branch. His splinted legs stuck out at an awkward angle. He wasn't supposed to be up, but Celine wasn't surprised. Stubborn man. "You came back," he said. "Did you think I wouldn't? Thought maybe you'd get to town and remember what normal life looked like. Change your mind about tying yourself to a crippled rancher and his broken family." She dismounted, walked up the porch steps, and kissed him thoroughly. "Still here," she said when they broke apart. "Still saying yes? Any other stupid doubts you want to voice?" "Probably, but I'll save them for later." The children came running, excited to see her, to help unpack, to show her everything that had happened in the 2 days she'd been gone. It felt like coming home, because it was home now. The wedding happened 6 weeks later, on a clear March morning when the worst of winter had passed, but spring hadn't quite arrived. They held it at the ranch because Rowan still couldn't ride comfortably, and neither of them wanted a big town ceremony anyway. The ranch hands cleaned up the barn, strung it with lanterns, built benches from rough-cut lumber. Mrs. Chen cooked for 3 days straight. Miguel somehow procured a fiddle player from a neighboring ranch. A handful of people came from Black Ridge, the Brennans, surprisingly, and a few others who'd apparently decided Celine deserved their support after all. But mostly it was ranch people. Workers who'd seen Rowan at his worst and were glad to see him at something approaching his best. Celine wore a simple dress Mrs. Chen had altered from one of Sarah's old ones. The old woman had offered it nervously, worried it would be inappropriate, but Celine understood the gesture for what it was. A blessing. A passing of the torch. She accepted it gratefully. Rowan waited at the makeshift altar in his best suit, leaning on a cane now instead of crutches, his broken leg still stiff but healing. When he saw Celine walking toward him with Clara and Eli on either side, the children had insisted on giving her away. His eyes went bright. The ceremony was short. No fancy words, no elaborate promises, just two people who'd survived alone for too long agreeing to try surviving together instead. When the ranch foreman, who was serving as impromptu minister, said, "You may kiss your bride," Rowan pulled Celine close and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for letting me in." The kiss was gentle, almost tentative, like they were both still learning how to do this, how to be soft with each other, how to believe good things could last. The celebration afterward was rowdy and warm. Someone produced whiskey. The fiddle player proved surprisingly good. Dancing happened despite Rowan's protests that he couldn't, and Celine found herself being spun around the barn floor by Miguel, then Tom, then Jackson, while her new husband watched from a chair with something that looked suspiciously like contentment on his face. Clara and Eli stayed up way past their bedtime, running wild with other ranch children, drunk on cake and excitement. Around midnight, Celine found them both asleep in a pile of hay, Eli's head on Clara's shoulder. "Should we wake them?" she asked Rowan. "Give them 5 more minutes. They're happy." "They are, aren't they?" "Because of you." She leaned against him. "Because of us. All of us." They stood watching their children sleep while the party continued around them, and Celine thought about how strange life was. 6 weeks ago, she'd been alone in a rented room planning to spend Christmas by herself. Now she was married, a stepmother, part of something bigger than survival. It wasn't perfect. Rowan still had nightmares about Sarah. Clara still had moments where grief ambushed her. Eli still got sick more often than he should, and Celine still caught herself waiting for the other shoe to drop, for this happiness to be revealed as temporary. But they were trying. Together. And maybe that was enough. The first few months were an adjustment. Celine had to learn how to run a household, how to manage servants, how to be a mother instead of a teacher. The transition wasn't smooth. She burned dinners, misread social cues, struggled to find the balance between being Clara and Eli's friend and being their parent. One night, about 3 months after the wedding, she found Clara crying in her room. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." "Clara." The girl looked up with red eyes. "Do I have to call you Mama?" The question hurt even though Celine understood where it came from. "No. You can call me whatever feels right to you." "I had a mama. She died. And I know you're trying to be nice, but you're not her, and sometimes I get confused because I love you, but I loved her, and..." Celine sat on the bed, pulled the girl into her arms. You can love both of us. Love isn't a limited resource. You don't have to choose. Really? Really? Your mother will always be your mother. Nothing changes that. I'm the person who gets to help raise you now. And I'm honored to do it. But I'm not trying to replace anyone. Clara buried her face in Celine's shoulder. Can I call you Celine instead of Mama? You can call me whatever you want. What about Miss Celine? Like I did when you were my teacher? That works too. The tension in the girl's small body relaxed. Okay, Miss Celine, I can do that. It was a small thing, but small things mattered when you were building a family from broken pieces. Rowan struggled too. His leg healed but left him with a limp he'd probably carry forever. Some days he was fine with it. Other days Celine found him standing at the window staring at nothing, lost in thoughts he wouldn't share. Talk to me, she'd say. Nothing to talk about. Liar. He'd turn and attempt a smile that didn't quite land. I'm fine. You're not fine, and that's okay. But don't shut me out. It took weeks, but eventually he started opening up. Started talking about the guilt he carried. Not just about Sarah anymore, but about the years he'd wasted being frozen. About the childhood he'd stolen from Clara and Eli by turning their home into a mausoleum. They forgive you, Celine told him one night as they lay in bed. You should forgive yourself. Don't know how. Then learn. The same way you learn to play piano again. The same way you learn to let me in. One day at a time. He pulled her closer. What did I do to deserve you? You asked me to Christmas, and you let me see past the walls you built. And you were brave enough to ask me to stay, even though you were terrified I'd leave. I'm still terrified you'll leave. I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me. Good. By summer, the ranch was thriving. The cattle were healthy, the breeding program was successful, and contracts with buyers were better than ever. Miguel suggested expanding into horses, and after long discussions, Rowan agreed. The house transformed too. Slowly, carefully, they started changing things. Sarah's shawl came down from beside the door. Her piano stayed, Clara was learning to play, but they moved it to a different room. New curtains went up. Fresh paint covered old walls. The portrait over the mantel was the last thing to address. One evening in late July, Rowan stood looking at it for a long time. Celine found him there, silent. We should take it down, he said finally. Are you sure? No, but it's time. Sarah wouldn't want to be worshipped like a shrine. She'd want to be remembered like a person. And that painting, it's not her. It's an idealized version of her that makes it impossible to move forward. They took it down together. Underneath, the wallpaper was darker, a ghost of where it had hung. We should put something else there, Celine said. Like what? I don't know. Something that represents all of us, not just the past. A week later, Rowan surprised her with a new commission, a portrait of their family. All 5 of them, Rowan and Celine, Clara and Eli, and Mrs. Chen, because the old woman was family too, whether she admitted it or not. When it was finished and hung over the mantel, the house finally felt complete. Not perfect, not without ghosts, but alive in a way it hadn't been for years. The first real test came that fall. A letter arrived from a law office in Denver. Celine's brother Jacob had been found, alive, working as a surveyor, completely unaware his sister had spent 10 years thinking he was dead. He wanted to reconnect, wanted to meet, wanted to apologize for abandoning her. Celine stood in the kitchen holding the letter, hands shaking. You should go, Rowan said. I don't know if I want to. He's your brother. He left me. For 10 years I grieved him and he was just living his life, not even trying to find me. Maybe he thought you were better off without him. That's not his choice to make. Rowan took the letter, read it again. Says here he tried to send for you twice. Letters got lost. He thought you never responded because you didn't want to see him. That's convenient. Maybe. Or maybe it's true. The frontier's big. Letters get lost. People lose touch. It happens. Celine wanted to stay angry. Anger was easier than forgiveness. Cleaner than complicated feelings about family who disappeared and reappeared like ghosts. But she was also learning, slowly, painfully, that holding on to old wounds didn't protect you. It just made you harder. Come with me, she said. To Denver. Meet him with me. You sure? I'm sure I don't want to do this alone. They made the trip in October, leaving the children with Mrs. Chen. Denver was bigger than Celine remembered, noisy, crowded, full of people who moved like they had somewhere important to be. Jacob met them at their hotel. He was older than Celine remembered, grayer, lines around his eyes that spoke of hard years spent doing hard work. But his eyes were the same, warm, familiar, achingly recognizable. Celine. Jacob. They stood looking at each other across 10 years of distance. I'm sorry, he said finally. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. For leaving you. For not trying harder to find you. For being a coward who thought you were better off without me dragging you down. I thought you were dead. I know. I found out when I finally tracked down the people you worked for in Montana. They said you'd moved on, that you'd become a teacher. I was proud and terrified. Because what right did I have to come back into your life after abandoning you? You're my brother. That's all the right you need. He smiled, and suddenly Celine saw the boy he'd been, the one who'd tried so hard to take care of her after their parents died, who'd failed and run away rather than watch her suffer. She stepped forward and hugged him. He held on like she might disappear if he let go. They spent 3 days in Denver talking, rebuilding something that had been broken for a decade. Jacob met Rowan, was properly intimidated, then relaxed when he realized Rowan wasn't the fearsome rancher everyone described, but a man who clearly loved Celine enough to let her work through her own family complications without interference. On their last night, Jacob asked, "Are you happy?" "Yes, actually happy. Not just surviving anymore." "Good. You deserve that." He hesitated. "Can I visit? Meet the children? Be part of your life again?" "I'd like that." They parted with promises to write, to stay connected, to not let another 10 years pass in silence. On the train ride home, Celine leaned against Rowan and said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For coming with me. For letting me be angry and scared and complicated. You let me be all those things, seemed fair. We're quite a pair." "Yeah, we are." Winter came again, and this time Celine watched it arrive without dread. The first snow fell the week before Christmas. Claire and Eli ran outside immediately, throwing snowballs, building forts, making angels in the fresh powder. Watching them, Celine remembered last year, remembered arriving at this ranch as a stranger, remembered not knowing if she'd survive the loneliness one more season. What a difference a year made. This Christmas, they decorated together, cut down a tree as a family, strung it with popcorn and paper chains, invited the entire ranch staff for dinner. Mrs. Chen outdid herself with cooking, Miguel played fiddle, and somewhere around midnight, Rowan pulled Celine onto the porch, the same porch where they'd first kissed a year ago. "Happy?" he asked. Deliriously. Even with all the chaos, the broken things, the mess. Especially with all that. She turned to face him. "Perfect is boring. I'll take messy and real any day." "Good. Because we're about to get messier." "What do you mean?" He looked nervous, actually nervous. "Mrs. Chen thinks you might be pregnant." Celine's world tilted. "What?" "You've been sick in the mornings, tired, emotional. She says she's seen it before." "I thought I just had a stomach complaint." "Maybe you do, or maybe—" He trailed off hopefully. Celine put a hand on her stomach, considering. She'd been too busy to pay attention to her body's rhythms, too focused on being a wife and stepmother and ranch manager to notice the small changes. But now that he mentioned it, "We should wait to know for sure," she said. "Yeah, but if it's true, if we're having a baby, you'd be happy?" "Terrified, but yes, happy." She kissed him. "Then let's be terrified and happy together." 2 months later, the doctor confirmed it. A baby, due in late summer. Clara was ecstatic. Eli was confused but excited. Mrs. Chen started knitting immediately, and Rowan walked around looking simultaneously proud and panicked. "What if something goes wrong?" he asked Celine one night. "What if it doesn't?" "I lost Sarah. And I'm not Sarah. I'm healthy, I have access to a good doctor, and I have you. We're going to be fine." "You don't know that." "No. But I choose to believe it anyway, and you should too." He pulled her close. "I love you. You know that, right?" "I know." If anything happened to you, it won't. Stop borrowing trouble. But she understood his fear, understood that loving someone meant being vulnerable to loss, that opening your heart meant accepting the risk that it could be broken. The alternative, though, staying frozen, staying safe, staying alone, that wasn't living. That was just a different kind of death. The baby came in August, on a day so hot even the chickens looked exhausted. Labor was brutal, hours of pain that made Celine understand why women were terrified of childbirth. But Mrs. Chen was there, competent and calm, and Rowan held her hand through it all, white-faced but present. When it was over, and the doctor placed a screaming, red-faced baby girl in Celine's arms, she looked at Rowan and saw tears streaming down his face. "We have a daughter," he whispered. "We have a daughter." Clara and Eli came in to meet their new sister, eyes wide with wonder. Clara immediately declared herself the baby's protector. Eli wanted to know when she'd be big enough to play with. "Not for a while yet," Celine said, exhausted but happy. They named her Sarah Elaine Cross, Sarah for Rowan's first wife, Elaine for Celine's mother. A bridge between past and present, between the family that was and the family that is. Mrs. Chen held the baby and cried, the first time Celine had ever seen her cry. Sarah would have loved this, loved seeing her family grow, seeing Rowan happy again. "Do you think she'd approve?" Celine asked quietly. "Of me? Of all this?" "I think she'd be grateful. That someone loved her children enough to become their mother. That someone loved her husband enough to thaw his frozen heart." Mrs. Chen looked at her. "You didn't replace her. You just continued what she started." The word settled something in Celine that had been uneasy for over a year. She wasn't a replacement, wasn't a substitute. She was just herself. A woman who'd been alone too long, who'd found a broken family and helped them heal, who'd learned that love didn't erase the past. It just made space for a future. The years that followed weren't perfect. Baby Sarah cried through the night for months. Eli's health remained fragile, requiring constant vigilance. Clara went through a rebellious phase at 12 that tested everyone's patience. The ranch had bad years mixed in with good ones. Jacob visited regularly, but their relationship remained complicated, healing slowly. And Rowan still had days where grief ambushed him, where he'd find some reminder of Sarah and disappear into himself for hours. But they made it work. They learned to fight fair, to apologize quickly, to ask for help instead of suffering in silence. They built traditions, Sunday dinners where everyone had to share one good thing from their week, annual trips to Denver to see Jacob, Christmas celebrations that grew bigger every year as the ranch family expanded. More children came. A boy they named Michael, then twins, a second chance at everything. The house that had been frozen became loud, chaotic, messy, alive. One evening, years later, Celine stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Inside, she could hear her family, Clara teaching the little ones a song, Rowan laughing at something Eli said, baby Sarah crying, Mrs. Chen scolding someone for tracking mud. Normal sounds, family sounds, the sounds of a life she'd built from nothing. Rowan came out, settled beside her, pulled her close. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About the woman I used to be. The one who spent Christmas alone in a rented room, convinced she'd never have a family." "You feel sorry for her?" "No, I feel grateful to her, for being brave enough to say yes when you invited her here, for taking a chance on something impossible." It did seem impossible, didn't it, that Christmas? Completely impossible. And now? She looked at this man she'd married, older now, grayer, still stubborn as hell, but softer around the edges. Still healing, but no longer frozen. Now it seems like the only thing that was ever possible. He kissed her temple. "I love you. I love you too." Inside, someone called for them. Dinner was ready. The children were waiting. They went in together, hand in hand, to the family they'd built from broken pieces. Because that's what life was. In the end. Not perfect moments or fairy tale endings, just broken people choosing to put themselves back together, choosing to keep trying, choosing love over fear again and again, until the choosing became as natural as breathing. The winter woman of Black Ridge had learned to live again, and in teaching a frozen family to thaw, she'd thawed herself. That was the real miracle. Not that they'd found each other. The frontier was full of lonely people who crossed paths and moved on. The miracle was that they'd chosen to stay. to fight for something good even when it was hard, to build something lasting even when they were terrified it would fall apart. Years later, when the children were grown and asking about how their parents met, Celine would tell them the truth. That love wasn't about perfection. It was about two people brave enough to see each other's broken places and say, "I'll help you carry that if you'll help me carry mine." It was about choosing each other even when it would be easier to stay safe and alone. It was about learning that surviving wasn't enough, that you had to risk living, even knowing loss could come again. And it was about understanding that the best families weren't the ones that never broke. They were the ones that broke and then put themselves back together, stronger for the fractures they'd survived. The Cross Ranch thrived for generations after that first Christmas. People in Black Ridge told stories about it, about the rancher who'd been frozen in grief until a schoolteacher showed up and taught his family to live again. But the stories got it wrong. Celine didn't save Rowan, and Rowan didn't save Celine. They just gave each other permission to stop surviving and start living. Sometimes that's all salvation is. Two broken people in a broken world, choosing to be broken together instead of alone. And somehow, impossibly, that's enough.